the worlds of the heavens starting with Game of Thrones. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 1, First Visit to King's Landing. Xia Changqing, 22 years old, male, loves women. At this moment, he is standing at the crossroads of his life, confused and entangled. Whether to go home and inherit the family business or start his own business, this is a very difficult question. System bound, plane search successful, ready to enter. 10, 9, 5, 3. What happened? Xia Changqing had many question marks in his mind, and he could guarantee that he was not hallucinating. When the electronic synthesized voice in his mind said 1, Xia Changqing's eyes suddenly went black, and he quickly lost consciousness. Damn it. Before losing consciousness, this was the only thought in Xia Changqing's mind. Choice 1. Defend the rights of the living. Choice 2. Establish the kingdom of the dead. Host, please make a choice as soon as possible. Xia Changqing regained consciousness from the darkness, and this information immediately appeared in his mind. I choose to go home. Xia Changqing shouted wildly in his heart, but it was a pity that the system that selected him seemed to be a cold machine without emotion. No matter how Xia Changqing shouted wildly in his heart, it was unmoved. Time is up. The host has not made a choice. Randomly selecting a task. Choice successful. King's Landing, the political center of the Seven Kingdoms, is the place where the Iron Throne stands on the continent of Westeros. Flea Bottom is where the poor people of King's Landing gather. Although in this ignorant medieval world, most people struggle in poverty except for those who are wealthy nobles, the people in Flea Bottom are even poorer. Dirty and messy environment, unkempt pedestrians, even the golden robes are unwilling to set foot here, let alone the nobles. Xia Changqing opened his eyes and saw this ignorant and backward world. He frowned and covered his nose with his hands involuntarily. The disgusting smell floating in his empty hands almost made Xia Changqing vomit. On the narrow muddy streets, ragged pedestrians walked by, and it seemed that no one noticed Xia Changqing, who suddenly appeared here. Before Xia Changqing could curse the unknown system in his heart, a strange message squeezed into his mind. Name: Xia Changqing. Current world, Game of Thrones. Selected task: establishing the kingdom of the dead. Skills already possessed: super perception, passive, return of the dead LV1, 1%, ice lance LV1, 1%. With the prompt of the system, Xia Changqing knew that he had been brought to the world of Game of Thrones by the dog system. This medieval world full of blood and death. The White Walkers in the north have awakened. Across the narrow sea, Daenerys of the Targaryen family has married the King of Horses and officially embarked on the road to rise. On the continent of Westeros, the struggle for power is still being staged every day. Xia Changqing, who was fortunate enough to be able to participate in it, wanted to cry, but had no tears. Because when he didn't know why, the dog system had automatically selected the task for him. Establishing the kingdom of the dead. This directly classified him into the camp of the White Walkers, and he had the same goal as the Night King. Xia Changqing felt a sense of enlightenment in his heart. If he could not complete the task, he would stay in this world forever. Ignorance and backwardness. Life safety is not guaranteed. When Xia Changqing thought about living in such a world for the rest of his life, he felt that his life was dark. I would rather die than die. In order to leave this world, isn't it just to establish the kingdom of the dead? He did it. But when Xia Changqing looked around at the figures of the living, he felt desperate and didn't know how to complete this task. Fortunately, the system directly stole a trace of the Night King's ability for him and blessed him. Return of the Dead LV1, 1%. Skill description: summon the soul of the dead and let it return to his body. The dead are absolutely obedient to the summoner. The dead have the memory of their life. Note: do your part to solve the problem of global warming. Ice Spear LV1, 1%. Skill description: summon an ice spear, or throw or stab. Note: you are the next Javelin King. These two skills were abilities that the Night King had used before, but when it came to Xia Changqing, the effect was greatly reduced. Fortunately, after the skill was transformed, the Return of the Dead had some other changes. Standing in the shadows on the side of the road, Xia Changqing digested the various information displayed by the system, and then took the first step to contact this world. In an instant, it seemed that the whole world had sound and color, and chaotic and noisy sounds broke into Xia Changqing's mind one after another. The function of the system is undoubtedly very powerful in some aspects, just like it has automatically matched Xia Changqing with clothes that match this world, and let him master all the languages of this world. Shameful traitor. Eddard Stark deserves death. Traitors deserve death. Sporadic and chaotic noises and whispers continued to flow into Xia Changqing's ears. With the blessing of super perception, he could hear all the sounds coming from the surroundings clearly. From the various conversations, Xia Changqing had already judged where the plot had come to. Robert Baratheon, the absurd king of the Seven Kingdoms, died absurdly under the tusks of a wild boar not long ago. Then Joffrey Baratheon sat on the Iron Throne and became king. However, Duke Eddard Stark, the regent in the hand of the king, did not agree with the legitimacy of Joffrey's succession to the Iron Throne, and was arrested and imprisoned. In fact, Eddard was right, but his integrity and leniency harmed himself and everyone from Winterfell. This is the biggest event happening in King's Landing at the moment. Is there anything more talked about than the Prime Minister's treason? Xia Changqing walked on the muddy streets of Flea Bottom, thinking about how to take his first step. Maybe Eddard Stark is an important person for him to gain a foothold in this world. But Eddard is now imprisoned in the Black Prison, and he has no ability to rescue him. Maybe he needs to find some helpers. Xia Changqing, in his grey shirt and grey pants, was dressed in a way that was very consistent with the characteristics of this world. In the flea den where the pool lived, no one would notice him. With his head lowered and his back bent, Xia Changqing blended into the flea den in an unusually low-key manner. He wandered around the streets, with his ears perked up, constantly collecting all kinds of information. Although most of the information was useless junk information to Xia Changqing, when the amount of this information increased, he could always find something he wanted. For example, information about gangs in the flea den, casinos, women's branches, and some gossip among the nobles. Chapter 2 Return of the Dead. Night fell. Most of the area in King's Landing was plunged into darkness, but some places were still as bright as day and bustling. Xia Changqing's figure was hidden in the darkness, and his stomach made a hungry rumbling sound from time to time. To be honest, Xia Changqing thought he was one of the worst among the time travelers. Although he was not the worst, he was not far behind. After wandering around for an afternoon, he did not even have a full meal. At this time, Xia Changqing was hiding in a dark corner outside a casino. He looked in the direction of the casino, and his eyes revealed a hint of viciousness. Under his feet was a pool of water formed by the melting of ice spears. Xia Changqing had already experimented. Although the ice spear he summoned had the disadvantages of being easy to melt and break, the tip of the spear was extremely sharp. As long as it could pierce the vital point, it could definitely kill a person easily. In such a world, Xia Changqing had to abandon his indecision, and compared to killing an ordinary person, killing a gambler or a villain made him feel more at ease. In patient waiting, Xia Changqing finally waited for his target. In the faint firelight from the casino, a gambler and drunkard with a red face, a smile on his lips, and humming the famous Westeros tune The King Strips, the Queen Takes Off Her Pants staggered towards the alley where Xia Changqing was. Xia Changqing suddenly felt a little nervous. Although Westeros is still in the long summer, the weather is not very hot, and there is a little sweat on Xia Changqing's forehead and palms. But the arrow is on the string, and has to be shot. Xia Changqing silently recited the ice spear technique in his heart. He felt his head sink slightly, and a 30-centimeter long ice cone suddenly appeared in his open palm. Holding the cold ice cone in his hand, Xia Changqing's spirit also relaxed. He held his breath slightly, and waited quietly for the prey to walk into the trap. The unlucky guy looked really drunk. He staggered as he walked, holding onto the wall all the way to the alley. He spitted hard, muttered to himself, took off his pants, and began to whimper. Xia Changqing came out of the darkness. He slowly came behind the unlucky guy, raised the ice cone in his right hand, and aimed at his neck. Stab hard, the other party will not even be able to scream, and will die. A voice sounded in Xia Changqing's heart, urging him to act quickly. However, the three views that had been formed for more than 20 years made Xia Changqing hesitant. He seemed to be standing on the edge of the abyss. If he took another step forward, he would fall into the bottomless abyss. Suddenly, the unlucky guy finished draining the water, trembled with comfort, and let out a cry like an orgasm from his throat. Xia Changqing was frightened, and he stabbed the ice cone in his hands subconsciously. By the time Xia Changqing realized what had happened, the sharp ice cone had already pierced the unlucky man's neck. He couldn't help but loosen his hand, and took a step back. The unlucky man didn't say a word, didn't even pull up his pants, and knelt down, bent forward, and knelt against the wall. His head tilted, and he lost his breath. I killed someone with my own hands. Xia Changqing spread his hands in front of him and was stunned. After an unknown amount of time, Xia Changqing suddenly trembled all over and came to his senses. He looked down at the corpse with its back to him, gritted his teeth, and put his hand on the back of the corpse. The dead are coming back. Xia Changqing said silently in his heart. Xia Changqing suddenly groaned. Just as he silently said the skill to start in his heart, he suddenly felt that his spirit was drained and his head hurt. However, the corpse under Xia Changqing's palm was undergoing drastic changes. A cold wind blew around, and a series of whispers that seemed to come from the depths of hell sounded in Xia Changqing's ears. He could feel the corpse under his palm shaking. Other dead corpse suddenly sighed from the throat, then stretched out his hand, held the wall, and tried to stand up from the ground. Xia Changqing was startled, and he quickly retracted his palm, stepped back a few steps, and watched the corpse, which should have been cold, stand up. Xia Changqing suddenly had an epiphany in his heart, and he ordered, "Turn around." The corpse froze, and then slowly turned his head with Xia Changqing's order, with a stiff smile on his face. "Greetings, master." The throat of the corpse made a harsh sound like steel rubbing against each other. Scary. Can it still speak? Xia Changqing's face was still in shock, and he carefully observed the living dead in front of him. Except for a sharp ice tip emerging from the throat, the other party was no different from an ordinary living person. "Of course I can speak." A voice suddenly sounded in Xia Changqing's heart. He looked at the revived corpse with a strange expression and said tentatively, "Put on your pants first. Let's leave here first. I wanted to put them on for a long time. Damn it, I don't have the habit of being naked in front of men." It can be confirmed that Xia Changqing can hear what the other party is thinking. Although the other party is full of vulgar words, Xia Changqing is very happy. The skill of the dead returning is really powerful. Half an hour later, Xia Changqing and Meris appeared in a hotel room. The room fee was paid by Meris. Before he was killed by Xia Changqing, he had just made a lot of money in the casino. Xia Changqing sat on the bed, and Meris sat on the bench in front of him, twisting and turning uneasily, trying to touch the hollow in his throat. The atmosphere became a little awkward for a while. "You know what happened, right?" Xia Changqing took the initiative to ask. The expression on Meris's face changed, and he knelt down in front of Xia Changqing with a plop. "Master, I know what happened. I'm dead. Thank you for giving me a new life." As he spoke, Meris tried to kiss Xia Changqing's shoes. "Get up first," Xia Changqing said quickly. He was not used to having his shoes kissed. Meris's sole instinct was to obey Xia Changqing unconditionally. He quickly stood up from the ground and stood in front of Xia Changqing. "Tell me, what's the difference between you and before?" Xia Changqing asked curiously. After a moment, Xia Changqing fully understood the difference between Meris after he was resurrected and before he was alive. Chapter 3, Joffrey, the Great Emperor. Meris, who had returned from the dead, had a much lower body temperature than a normal person, and his skin felt a little cold. A normal person's heartbeat is more than 70 beats a minute, but Meris' heartbeat has slowed to only a dozen beats a minute. Moreover, his perception of pain and other sensations has also been reduced a lot. After Xia Changqing pierced his body with an ice cone again, Meris only felt a slight stinging sensation. In general, if Meris could plug the hole in his throat, he would be no different from a normal person. When it comes to this issue, Meris's heart is full of complaints. "Master, when you kill me, why don't you choose the position of the heart, so that I can cover it up when I put on clothes?" Meris did not feel uncomfortable about the fact that he had been killed, and although he still had his own thoughts and ideas, he completely obeyed Xia Changqing. At most, he complained a few words, but he didn't even dare to think of any idea that would be unfavorable to Xia Changqing. After learning about Meris's various changes, Xia Changqing was relieved. He was glad that he did not create a soul without thoughts that only knew how to kill living people. It is equivalent to creating a new race, the undead. Time flies. King's Landing. Red Keep, Meagher's Tower. King Joffrey's living room is decorated gorgeously and elegantly. At this moment, the young king is standing in front of the bed in the bedroom with a smug smile on his face. Two maids are busy and carefully dress the king. His Majesty Joffrey has long golden hair and a stag crown made of gold on his head. The emblem of the Baratheon family is the crowned stag. Although there is a rumor in the Seven Kingdoms that his last name should be Lannister, no one dares to say this in front of His Majesty Joffrey. The king is wearing a scarlet knee-length robe, neat black trousers, and a cape embroidered with a crowned stag and a roaring lion on his shoulders, which complements his handsome face. Joffrey was so proud that he couldn't wait to show off in front of Sansa, listen to her compliments, and order her traitor father to chop off his head in front of her. Joffrey liked to see Sansa's disappointed expression, which made him very happy. Joffrey, today's trial must not go wrong. After Eddard Stark pleads guilty, you must sentence him to be stripped of all his status and power, and order him to wear black and go to the wall. Thinking of his mother Cersei's nagging again, Joffrey frowned slightly and then quickly relaxed. He turned his head and looked at his mother with a smile. Don't worry, mother, I remember it all. No, I will order his head to be chopped off. I'm the king. Joffrey thought secretly. The two then went out and boarded the carriage together under the protection of the king's guard. The carriage left Meagher's Holdfast and set off from the Red Keep to the Cathedral of St. Bela. The trial was held in the Cathedral of St. Bela. Behind the king's carriage, Sansa, the young lady from the Stark family in the north, was sitting in the carriage, feeling uneasy. The team began to move forward slowly. In front of the square of St. Bela's Cathedral, residents from all over King's Landing had already gathered together, and the crowd was crowded together, waiting to see the powerful nobles being tried. When King Joffrey got off the carriage, the crowd cheered violently and shouted the king's name. Look, everyone knows who the real king is. Joffrey turned his head with satisfaction and looked at his mother, but found that she was talking to Sansa in a low voice and didn't notice this scene at all. This made His Majesty dissatisfied, and he couldn't help but shouting loudly, Sansa. Sansa, who was talking to Queen Mother Cersei, quickly raised her head and looked at King Joffrey with pitiful eyes like a little deer. Don't worry, Sansa, I will judge your traitor father fairly. Thank you, Your Majesty. Sansa looked at Joffrey with gratitude, which made the king smile again. He seemed to think of how interesting Sansa's expression would be when he ordered the old direwolf to be chopped off, which made him impatient. King Joffrey didn't have to wait too long. With a team of knights leading the way, Eddard Stark was pushed to the podium. I'm Eddard Stark, the Duke of Winterfell and the Warden of the North, and the Prime Minister, Eddard said. He lived for honor all his life, but now he lost his honor for his daughter. He looked at the contempt, joy, and malice in the crowd under the podium. For the first time, Eddard Stark doubted the honor he had upheld. Thinking of the agreement reached with Cersei, Eddard said loudly, today, I'm here, in front of the gods in heaven and the mortals on earth, to confess my treason. Ignoring the increasingly loud noise below the platform, Eddard continued, I betrayed my king, my brother, Robert, and I betrayed his trust. Now, let the seven gods and the god of the first men jointly testify. Joffrey Baratheon is the only legitimate heir to the Iron Throne, the ruler of the seven kingdoms and the protector of the whole realm. Eddard's voice fell, and he lowered his head dejectedly. He no longer had any honor to speak of. As for the words from time to time from the platform, such as traitor, kill him, he no longer cared. As long as Sansa and Arya could live safely, he would be willing to die. The shouts of the crowd were endless, making His Majesty Joffrey's heart boil with blood. Look, this is the will of the people. How can he, who loves the people like his own children, live up to everyone's wishes? Joffrey held the sword hanging on his waist. He ignored his mother's nagging and Sansa's pleading, and turned to look at the executioner. My mother urged me to let Lord Eddard wear black clothes, and Lady Sansa also begged me to let her father go. But that was all, because of their women's hearts. The seven gods, as long as I'm king, I will never let the traitor go. After that, King Joffrey said excitedly. Sir Rylan, cut off his head for me. The masked royal law enforcer stepped forward and drew out the two-handed giant sword he used for execution. Amid the waves of cheers, he raised it with force. The blade drew an arc and slashed down suddenly. The giant sword was sharp and gently brushed Eddard's neck so that he did not feel much pain and fell into eternal darkness. The crowd suddenly burst into violent cheers, resounding over the entire King's Landing. Ravens flew and the Seven Kingdoms were shaken. Chapter 4. Corpse Stealing. When Eddard Stark was on trial on the high platform of the church, Xia Changqing was staring at him in the crowd below the platform. Eddard Stark was beheaded by a sword, and his head rolled on the ground, and the blood spurting from his neck splashed a large pool. Fear appeared on Xia Changqing's face. He subconsciously turned his head away, and didn't look at Eddard's headless body. Xia Changqing, who grew up under the red flag, had never seen such a scene. Although there are such scenes in some movies and TV dramas, they are all beautified in movies and TV dramas, and they are not as shocking as seeing it with your own eyes. The cheers that kept coming from his ears made Xia Changqing feel a chill in his heart. After seeing a great noble like Eddard being beheaded, the residents of King's Landing cheered from the bottom of their hearts, which was so malicious. Keep your voice down, Maris. Don't forget what I told you to do. Keep an eye on Eddard Stark's body. Don't worry, Master, I've given you all the instructions. I won't let you down. Maris looked at Xia Changqing with a flattering smile on his face. His life during this period of time was very dreamy. He had acquired superhuman abilities, successfully rose to power in the gang, controlled the gang in Flea Bottom, and reached the peak of his life. Now the Master has set his sights on Eddard Stark again. When Maris thought that the Prime Minister of the Seven Kingdoms and the Duke of Winterfell would become like him, he felt excited and trembling all over. Xia Changqing looked at Maris with a serious face. Eddard Stark was of great significance to his next move, so he was determined to get Eddard's body. After realizing that Xia Changqing didn't seem to be joking, the smile on Maris's face gradually disappeared, and he became serious. Master, don't worry, I will keep an eye on it myself. Xia Changqing retracted his gaze from staring at Maris and looked back at the platform. After a brief adaptation, he was able to look at Eddard's headless body as if nothing had happened. On the platform, King Joffrey had already left surrounded by knights, followed by Queen Cersei. As for Lady Sansa, she had fainted from grief long before Eddard was beheaded. The scene was taken over by the gold cloaks of the King's Landing garrison. They picked up Eddard's head, lifted his body, and were preparing to leave. Because Xia Changqing was familiar with the plot, he knew that Eddard's head would be put on the tip of a spear by King Joffrey the Great, placed on the city wall, and forced Sansa to look at it. Eddard's head was not difficult to find, but the whereabouts of his body was mainly unknown to Xia Changqing, so he needed Maris to keep an eye on the gold cloaks. Maris, follow them, don't lose them. After seeing the golden robes lift up Eddard's body and leave, Xia Changqing immediately called Maris to follow. Maris followed Xia Changqing, and he didn't think he would lose them. After all, the golden robe's target was so conspicuous, and for Xia Changqing's order, he had sent all the people in the gang. These people blended into the crowd, and would definitely not attract the attention of the golden robes. Xia Changqing heard Maris's indifferent thoughts, but he didn't say much. As long as Maris could do his best, he didn't mind destroying him afterwards. Since I can bring you back to life, I can let you die miserably again. During this period of time, Xia Changqing has seen the darkness of this world. In the process of Maris's rise to power, he has killed no less than 3 people. Although these 3 people were resurrected by Xia Changqing using the return of the dead, the reality that human life is worthless has deeply shocked Xia Changqing's heart. Let's not talk about it. Xia Changqing and Maris followed the crowd, staring at the golden robes carrying Eddard's body. After leaving the Cathedral of St. Bela, the golden robes were stopped by a man with a hint of a smile on his face. Seeing the golden robes in awe of the man, Xia Changqing looked at Maris. Master, that's the Chancellor of the Exchequer Littlefinger. I heard that half of the women's brothels in King's Landing are opened by Littlefinger. The girls there are all pretty and lovely, but it's a pity that I haven't had the chance to see them. At this point, Maris smacked his lips with regret. So this is Littlefinger. Xia Changqing thought to himself that Littlefinger was a complete conspirator. The conflict between the Starks in the north and the Lannisters in the west was caused by Littlefinger. Chaos is the ladder to rise. This is the truth that Littlefinger has always been following. On the street, Littlefinger said something to the gold cloaks and handed over a purse openly. Even from a distance, Xia Changqing could still tell that the purse was full of golden dragons. For the sake of the golden dragons, the gold cloaks saluted Littlefinger respectfully, and then the team split into two parts. One part held the box containing Eddard's head and walked towards the Red Keep. The other part followed Littlefinger. Xia Changqing and Merys followed all the way and saw with their own eyes that the gold cloaks handed over Eddard Stark's body to Littlefinger's people. It's a pity that Eddard Stark's reputation in his lifetime still became a bargaining chip for others to climb up after his death. Xia Changqing didn't know what Littlefinger's purpose was in taking Eddard's body away, but it was definitely not out of kindness to collect Eddard's body. Merys, go gather some people and steal Eddard Stark's body for me at night. Yes, master. Merys had no intention of resisting Xia Changqing's order, although stealing a duke's body from the Chancellor of the Exchequer was enough to get him beheaded or put in a black robe. After confirming the location of Eddard Stark's body, Xia Changqing and Merys returned to the flea pit, where the gang was located. Although the gang controlled by Merys was not large, it had reached more than 20 people. They regarded the fearless Merys as an idol and were a little fanatical. Xia Changqing was hiding behind the scenes, followed by 3 people who died in the gang fight. They were full of jealousy for Merys, but they did not dare to resist Xia Changqing's will. Under Xia Changqing's arrangement, after midnight, Merys led the brothers in the gang to steal Eddard's body from Littlefinger. Then the 3 people who were transformed into undead beings stole Eddard's head hanging on the wall of the Red Castle. Because of the golden robe guarding, stealing the head was somewhat dangerous, so Xia Changqing gave a death order that, even if 3 people sacrificed themselves, they must bring out Eddard's head. Although even Xia Ji didn't know how to kill these resurrected dead now. Chapter 5, Stitches Eddard Stark. As the night deepened, the entire King's Landing fell into darkness and silence. On the outer wall of the Red Castle, a squad of the city guard wearing golden robes was on routine duty. Today, the commander of the city guard is Janus Slimed. He is a native of King's Landing, and his father is a butcher in King's Landing. Because of his humble origins, Janus has an extraordinary passion for the Golden Dragon. As the superiors follow the example of the subordinates, the gold cloaks of the garrison are naturally rich and powerful. Because the city guard is only loyal to the royal family and is responsible for the security of the entire King's Landing, their status is naturally special. In addition, because Janus chose to stand on the side of Lannister in this power struggle, the entire garrison was reused by Queen Mother Cersei. In this case, the gold cloaks were naturally not so concerned about standing guard on the city wall at night, and they didn't think that anyone would come to the city wall at night. There was really nothing important here except human heads. At this time, would anyone still care about the heads of these northerners? Except for the somewhat perverted King Joffrey, there was no one else. So when Xia Changqing and his 3 followers came up to the base of the city wall, they found that the guards here were not very strict. With Xia Changqing's order, the 3 followers immediately rushed out and began to climb the city wall. They also saw Eddard's head being chopped off during the day, so they knew the Prime Minister's appearance. But as expected by Xia Changqing, the actions of the 3 people were still discovered by the Golden Cloaks, and the city wall suddenly became chaotic. Xia Changqing stayed quietly in place. He believed that the 3 fearless undead would successfully bring back Eddard Stark's head for him. With Xia Changqing's patient waiting, only more than 10 minutes later, a person ran to Xia Changqing with a spherical object in his arms. "Master, it's done. Only one person came back. Let's go." Xia Changqing didn't ask what happened to the other 2. He called out, and the 2 quickly disappeared into the darkness. Xia Changqing had already issued an order that no matter which of the 3 was caught by the gold cloaks, they would not tell any news about Xia Changqing. Janus Slimed, the commander-in-chief of the capital's guard, was woken up in the middle of the night. Before he could get angry, he was told by his subordinates that someone had taken away Eddard Stark's head. He quickly swallowed the words he wanted to get angry about and began to think about how to report this to King Joffrey. He had reason to believe that King Joffrey would be furious after learning about this. It was only when the gold cloaks reported again that they had caught 2 criminals that Janice was greatly relieved. Not to mention how Joffrey got angry in Meagher's tower the next day when he learned that Eddard Stark's head was missing and ordered the gold cloaks to catch the criminals. In a secret place in Flea Bottom, Xia Changqing looked at the complete body of Eddard Stark, which had been pieced together with shining eyes, as if he had seen a peerless beauty. He himself felt that he was a little perverted. But now there was still a problem. Merys, Mark, can anyone help me sew Eddard Stark's head and body together? Merys and Mark, who had escaped by chance, looked at each other and gasped. Although in a sense, they were both dead, they were a little at a loss about sewing a person's head and body together. But under Xia Changqing's mandatory order, the 2 people who had been resurrected from the dead suppressed their nausea and discomfort, and sewed Eddard Stark's head and body together with ordinary sewing needles and wool. It's a great blessing to be able to be resurrected from the dead. I don't think Duke Eddard Stark would mind, right? Xia Changqing looked at the horrible sutures and didn't know who he was talking to. Merys and the other man nodded in agreement. They were not professional craftsmen, and it was already very good to be able to sew to this extent. Let's not embarrass them. Xia Changqing sighed and put his hand on Eddard without hesitation. The gold cloaks were searching for Eddard Stark, the accomplice of the traitor, in King's Landing. He didn't have much time to waste here. He silently chanted in his heart, "The dead are returning." The whispers that seemed to come from hell echoed in the dark basement. It seemed that this place had become a scene for the casting of evil black magic. Even though it was not the first time to see such a scene, Merys and the other man still felt a chill in their hearts. As Xia Changqing's mental power was drained, the corpse under his palm began to shake violently. After experiencing so much, Xia Changqing was no longer scared by the scene. He let go of his hand calmly and waited quietly for Eddard Stark to wake up. The skill of returning from the dead was activated successfully. Bang! Eddard Stark, who had become a cold corpse, suddenly sat up from the bed. Eddard Stark slowly exhaled a long breath. Am I still alive? As soon as he opened his mouth, Eddard Stark was startled by his own voice, hoarse and gloomy, as if it was the voice of a dead person. Duke Eddard Stark, welcome back from hell. Yes, I'm dead. Did you resurrect me? Eddard Stark said word by word. Although it was a questioning tone, his eyes revealed a sense of enlightenment. Eddard had already understood his current situation. Eddard Stark stood up from the bed to the ground. He was like a baby who had just learned to walk, toddling, and his arms were stiffly stroking the hideous stitches on his neck. Then, in the extremely expectant eyes of Merys and Mark, Eddard Stark slowly half-knelt beside Xia Changqing. Meet the master. Although Eddard Stark had already determined in his heart that Xia Changqing was an evil dark wizard, and the method he used to resurrect him was nothing more than evil dark magic, the purpose was to make him obey his orders. However, the imprisonment ingrained deep in Eddard's soul made Eddard Stark, the former Prime Minister, the Guardian of the North, and the Duke of Winterfell, still kneel down in front of Xia Changqing involuntarily. Xia Changqing didn't care what Eddard was thinking in his heart. He was very satisfied with the current result. With Eddard alone, the North is under control. Chapter 6 Littlefinger is terrified. King's Landing, Flea Bottom. Rumors from the outside world have been rife. There are rumors that Eddard Stark left a backup in King's Landing, but he did not expect that he would be killed accidentally. But the backup he left behind snatched back Eddard's body. His Majesty Joffrey, a wise king, was furious in Meagher's tower again, taking out his anger on poor Lady Sansa. At the same time, young Wolf Lord Robb Stark and Duke Tywin Lannister also received the news that Eddard was killed. The war between the North and the West has spread even more fiercely. The resurrected Eddard Stark is eager to return to the North immediately, but on the one hand, he is no longer under his control, and on the other hand, Sansa is still under Joffrey's control. Eddard never wants to see Sansa marry Joffrey. In the secret room of Flea Bottom, Eddard looked at Xia Changqing with pleading eyes, hoping to take Sansa away from King's Landing. This is also a headache for Xia Changqing. King's Landing is already a place of trouble. The gold cloaks are searching the streets for the person who stole Eddard's body. Xia Changqing believes that the longer he stays in King's Landing, the more danger he will face. It is better to leave early. Once you leave King's Landing, you can still enjoy the vast sea and sky. But looking at the pleading in Ed's eyes, Xia Changqing finally softened his heart. In his plan, Ed Stark is a very important part, and Ed, who has been resurrected, is not at all without thoughts. He does not want to be able to force Ed to do things with only tough orders. Ed, I promise you. But I will not put myself in danger. In times of crisis, you must put my safety as the first principle. It is better to be careful. Ed Stark could not disobey Xia Changqing's orders, so he naturally would not have any objections. In King's Landing, chaos has already appeared. Because the North was at war with the West, many ordinary people who were displaced by the war gathered in King's Landing, praying that King Joffrey could make a decision for them. King Joffrey, who had been sitting on the Iron Throne for some time, slowly discovered that the Iron Throne was not as easy to sit on as he had imagined. The Iron Throne, which was made by melting countless sharp swords, is still covered with various sharp sword tips. According to legend, several Targaryen kings in history fell on the Iron Throne and were stabbed to death by sword tips. This made King Joffrey, who was sitting on the Iron Throne, feel uncomfortable all over. After kicking the government affairs to the ministers in front of the king again, King Joffrey happily returned to Meagher's tower. How could dealing with government affairs be as happy as bullying Sansa? The sun set, and another day passed. The ministers in front of the king, who had dealt with government affairs for a day, scattered. The Minister of Finance, Petty Baelish, rubbed his eyebrows with a headache, and the smile that often hung on the corners of his mouth disappeared. It was a troubled time. The disappearance of Eddard Stark's body frightened Littlefinger. He didn't know who did it. If it was really done by the Northerners, did they know that he had betrayed Eddard Stark? Littlefinger felt that he couldn't sleep or eat well until this matter was resolved. Littlefinger walked out of the Red Keep, looking very worried. He crossed the cobblestone square and walked into the narrow alley. Although he had a lot of worries, he couldn't do without the work of checking the accounts in the brothels every day. The brothels of all sizes in King's Landing brought countless gold dragons to Littlefinger every day, and his daily habit was to check all the accounts of the day and then rest in the brothel. When he thought of those golden dragons, Littlefinger's bad mood because of the disappearance of Eddard's body improved a lot. When he was about to cross the narrow alley, Littlefinger's footsteps suddenly stopped, and his face became solemn. Not far from him, a shadowy figure covered in a black robe leaned against the wall, with a hooded head looking in his direction. The person coming here is not friendly. This thought quickly crossed Littlefinger's mind. Did the people from the north come to take revenge? He didn't know, so Littlefinger chose to turn around quickly. As long as he got out of the narrow alley and shouted loudly to attract the golden robe, the other party would be unable to do anything to him. However, as soon as Littlefinger turned around, he felt his hair stand on end. A tall shadow had already quietly stuck behind him. When he turned around, a sharp dagger was easily handed to his throat. Feeling the chill in his throat, Littlefinger had no doubt that, as long as the other party exerted a little force, he would end his life. This sense of danger made Littlefinger tremble all over. He felt pain all over his body. His wonderful life had just started to improve, and he didn't want to go to see the god so early. Don't kill me. I have golden dragons. If you ask me, how many golden dragons can buy my life? As soon as Littlefinger opened his mouth, he took out his biggest bargaining chip. Money can move people's hearts. Littlefinger, who knew the power of money, also believed that no one could resist the attack of golden dragons. Even if the opponent is a northerner who is as hard as a stone in the north, if the opponent is not tempted, it means that the golden dragons are not given enough. I'm Petty Baelish. I have countless golden dragons. If you let me go, they will all be yours. Littlefinger raised the stakes again. It's a pity Littlefinger didn't know that the enemy he was facing this time was a dead person. Would a dead person be tempted by a golden dragon? What's more, although the person who threatened Littlefinger with a knife was also a northerner, he was not an ordinary northerner. Lord Petty, we meet again. The tall figure slowly opened his mouth, and his voice was as harsh and unpleasant as the friction between metal and iron. As the black shadow slowly took off his hood, Littlefinger squeezed out a groan from his throat helplessly. I really saw a White Walker. Littlefinger was shaking all over, not because of the joy of seeing an old friend, but because of fear. His eyes were twitching, his teeth were chattering, his knees were shaking, and he couldn't help but kneel down. Lord Eddard? Littlefinger looked at the person in front of him in disbelief. He had expected all kinds of people to avenge him for Eddard, but he never expected that the person who came would be Eddard Stark himself. Littlefinger thought he was a very brave person, otherwise he would not have instigated Lyssa to poison Jonnarin. But when a dead person appeared alive in front of Littlefinger again, the courage in Littlefinger's heart was instantly extinguished. He now only hoped that this was a nightmare, and this nightmare would be over quickly. Chapter 7, Edd's Revenge. Seeing Littlefinger's unusually interesting and complicated expression, Eddard had expected it in his heart. He wanted to show a smile at the corner of his mouth, but unfortunately, he seemed to have lost the ability to smile. With a twitch of his mouth, Eddard said again in a stiff voice, "Lord Petty, long time no see." Bang! Before Littlefinger was frightened to the point of incontinence, he was hit hard on the back of his head and fortunately fainted. Perhaps for him, fainting at this time was the happiest thing. "Lord Eddard, don't waste time, the master is still waiting for us to go back." It was Maris who hit Littlefinger on the back. He said to Eddard impatiently. Speaking to a duke like this almost made Maris climax. This was something he dared not think of as a civilian. Eddard remained silent and did not care about Maris's attitude. The dead no longer cared about so many things. In the darkness, 2 dead people took the living away. If you associate with the dead, you will eventually become a dead person. Haha. Littlefinger woke up from the darkness. He first breathed violently and then coughed. The cough was caused by fear. The cough was unstoppable, as if he was going to cough out his heart and lungs. After the violent cough, Littlefinger was finally able to observe the environment he was in. In a dark room, the air was filled with an unpleasant smell, which belonged to the lower city. In front of him, 3 figures stood quietly. The 3 people did not hide their faces, so Littlefinger could see their appearance clearly. 2 of them looked unfamiliar, and Littlefinger had never seen them before, but the one standing in the middle was Eddard Stark. "Lord Eddard." Littlefinger wanted to smile. He wanted to say hello with a smile and congratulate the other party on his resurrection, but fear made it difficult for him to breathe. 7 gods, he saw Eddard Stark's head being chopped off with his own eyes. After seeing Littlefinger wake up, Eddard stood up from silence, walked to Littlefinger, and drew a short sword from his waist. "Lord Petty, thank you for teaching me a lesson. This is to repay you," Eddard said. Without waiting for Littlefinger to react, he pierced Littlefinger's abdomen with a sword. Ugh! Littlefinger screamed in pain, and he wanted to open his mouth to beg for mercy. But Eddard did not stop. He drew his sword, and then drew his sword. "This sword is for Sansa to thank you." "Draw the sword. Draw the sword." "This sword is for Arya to thank you." "This sword is for Jory." "This sword is for..." Eddard said calmly, stabbing Littlefinger with the sword again and again. In fact, when he stabbed the 3rd sword, Littlefinger had already died in pain and fear. But Eddard still insisted on stabbing Littlefinger with swords for the dead Winterfell attendants and servants. This was not in line with Eddard's status as a Duke of Winterfell, but a dead person could not have any status. "Stop it, Eddard." Xia Changqing walked out of the shadows. He looked at Eddard, who had a calm face, and then looked at Littlefinger, who had been dead for a long time, and whose entire abdomen and chest was smashed into mud. He couldn't help but shudder. If this honest man gets angry, he is really not easy to mess with. Eddard nodded to Xia Changqing to apologize, and said calmly, "I'm sorry, my lord, I have caused you trouble." Eddard knew what Xia Changqing was going to do next. He was powerless to stop it, and he didn't want to stop it. After all, the next task of rescuing Sansa would fall on Littlefinger. Xia Changqing didn't care. He just felt a little disgusted when he saw Littlefinger's miserable appearance. So in order to prevent Littlefinger's appearance from polluting his eyes, Xia Changqing quickly put his hand on Littlefinger's head and activated the skill of returning the dead. "Master, I have an unwelcome request." Just as Xia Changqing was casting the spell, Eddard suddenly spoke. "You say?" Xia Changqing replied. "I hope that the master can revive those people who followed me to King's Landing. They are all poor people, but now they died tragically under Cersei's order because of me." Xia Changqing looked back at Eddard with a complicated look. Eddard was indeed a kind person. "It's just, Eddard, reviving them will not bring me any benefits. On the contrary, it is not possible to bring me a catastrophe. Joffrey must have kept those people's bodies under strict guard because of you." We have no chance. Xia Changqing coldly rejected Eddard's request. He could agree to rescue Sansa, a living person, but he would not take risks for a group of dead people. Since coming to the Game of Thrones, Xia Changqing has changed a lot. Ed was silent, standing aside with his hands hanging down. The room fell into silence, and then the silence was broken with Littlefingers' call. One more member of the undead was added. Lord Petty Baelish's routine audit was not delayed, but he came a little later than usual. No one noticed that Lord Petty was different from usual, but Littlefinger knew that he was very different from before. A dead person came back to the world. It was really evil black witchcraft. The sky of the Seven Kingdoms was about to change. The corners of Littlefinger's mouth were covered with the old smile, because he didn't need to be afraid now. A dead person really had nothing to be afraid of. Littlefinger couldn't sleep all night. He thought of the task given to him by the Dark Wizard, the mysterious man Xia, to secretly bring Lady Sansa out of the Red Castle without alarming anyone. When Littlefinger thought of the difficulty of this task, he felt a dull pain in his lower abdomen again. Damn Eddard Stark. Littlefinger cursed. But the task had to be completed. Littlefinger had no way to disobey the order of the mysterious man. He didn't even dare to think about it. He didn't think there was anything wrong with it. Every dead person resurrected by Xia Changqing would naturally do his best to complete his orders. Thinking of his own task, Littlefinger had already thought of a person. One of the important ministers in charge of intelligence work, the octopus spider Varys. But the octopus spider is a cunning person, and Littlefinger himself does not have any power to kill the other party without anyone knowing, and then make him one of his own. But fortunately, Littlefinger is not without advantages. The Golden Dragon can help him achieve all the goals he wants to achieve. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 8. The Excitement of the Undead Coven. My lords, more and more refugees are coming to King's Landing. If this continues, the entire King's Landing will be overcrowded in less than half a month. Varys spoke, and the latest day's royal meeting was held as scheduled. Varys the Eight-Clawed Spider, the Minister of Intelligence of King's Landing, is said to have his little birds all over the world, and there is nothing Varys doesn't know. Although these rumors are somewhat exaggerated, they also indirectly illustrate the strength of Varys' intelligence ability. When he was young, he was cut off his treasure by the black magic of lies. No one knows how. Varys escaped from the wizard and established an all-knowing intelligence organization on the other side of the narrow sea. But it is undeniable that Varys' ability and intelligence is innate, and no one can compare to him. Otherwise he would not have been hired as the Minister of Intelligence by the Mad King at that time. Varys, who has experienced 3 generations of kings, no one knows what he is thinking in his heart, and Littlefinger has set his sights on him, not knowing whether it is a blessing or a curse. At the Royal Council, King Joffrey left after a short stay as usual, leaving all the political affairs to Queen Cersei and the royal ministers. King Joffrey had recently acquired new toys, and therefore was not very angry about the theft of Eddard Stark's body. King Joffrey left the Royal Council and led his guards all the way to the underground of the Red Keep, where there was a laboratory built specifically for Qyburn. Qyburn was originally a maester in Old Town, but was expelled from the Citadel because of his passion for human experiments. After arriving in King's Landing, he joined the Bloody Spectacle, but the Bloody Spectacle could not meet Qyburn's experimental needs at all, so he set his sights on the most powerful king of the 7 kingdoms on the entire continent. This was undoubtedly a good move, as King Joffrey, the great emperor of all ages, happened to be extremely passionate about these things. When he was a child, he was curious about how many kittens a mother cat had, so he directly broke open the mother cat's belly and used a sword to pick up the unformed kittens to show off to Robert Baratheon. King Robert was very shocked and gave Joffrey a severe lesson. From then on, Joffrey was full of fear of Robert. But now Robert was dead, and the whole King's Landing was ruled by King Joffrey. He could do whatever he wanted. Even if Queen Cersei slapped him, Joffrey threatened that hitting the king would be a capital crime. So Joffrey, who had a similar taste with Qyburn, generously built a laboratory for Qyburn in the basement of the Red Castle. Joffrey walked down the stairs quickly. He was extremely tired of those endless government affairs. He thought that those things were far less happy than watching Qyburn's experiments. The king walked into the laboratory. Qyburn had been waiting here for a long time. He knew that, as long as he served the little king well, he could get a steady stream of funding. Mr. Qyburn, how is the progress of the experiment? Tell me. Joffrey asked excitedly. Your Majesty, the experiment has made a breakthrough. Please follow me. Qyburn led the way, and led His Majesty into his laboratory. There were 2 beds in the center of the spacious laboratory, and 2 naked figures were locked tightly on the beds. No matter how hard the 2 figures struggled, they still couldn't break free from the shackles. Your Majesty, this is really an amazing discovery. The 7 gods, each of them has amazing vitality. I have tried to kill them many times, but I have never succeeded. Qyburn, I don't allow you to kill them. This is the king's order. Joffrey said, somewhat displeased. He finally got these 2 perfect toys. How could he tolerate Qyburn killing them? Follow your will, my Majesty. Qyburn replied in fear. Joffrey waved his hand casually. He didn't care about Qyburn's attitude. Show me. Qyburn nodded obediently and took the order. He walked forward, regardless of the 2 people struggling hard on the bed, and picked up a sharp scalpel from the table beside him. Your Majesty, please look. Qyburn gestured as he used the blade in his hand to cut open the chest of a test subject, from the throat to the lower abdomen. The knife was extremely powerful, directly cutting open the man's entire chest, and his internal organs were perfectly exposed, but surprisingly, no blood flowed out of the man's body. Huh. Joffrey's eyes widened with excitement, and he looked at the king's guard beside him. Look, he was disemboweled, but he can still move. The king's guard around the king showed a look of horror. Although they were the most powerful knights in the 7 kingdoms, they had never seen such a scene. How could someone survive after being disemboweled? Let go of the thing in his mouth. I have something to ask him. King Joffrey did not show any fear. He watched this abnormal scene with interest and asked someone to remove the foreign object stuffed in the test subject's mouth. After the man was free to speak, he immediately spat at Joffrey fiercely. Unfortunately, because he was fixed on the bed, the saliva did not fly far, but fell on himself. King Joffrey laughed happily. If it weren't for the other party's identity, he would have rewarded the other party with several gold dragons on the spot. Untouchable, tell me who you are, why you can survive in this situation, and why you stole Eddard Stark's body. King Joffrey had a lot of questions. However, after spitting, the man kept silent and had no intention of answering Joffrey. That's right, the 2 men who were used as test subjects were 2 of the 3 people sent by Xia Changqing to steal Eddard's head. But Joffrey didn't know that the 2 men had been ordered by Xia Changqing that they could not say anything about Xia Changqing. So King Joffrey was destined to be disappointed. The enraged King Joffrey angrily ordered Mr. Qyburn to remove the other party's internal organs. Under Joffrey's gaze, Qyburn removed the heart, lungs, stomach and other organs from the man's chest one by one. Even so, the man still stared at Joffrey with wide eyes and did not die completely. At this point, Joffrey finally felt a little scared. This kind of counterintuitive thing is enough to make people feel scared. Humans always have, or of the unknown. So King Joffrey was afraid, and his fear directly led to King's Landing falling into shadows, and the Golden Cloaks once again intensified their search. Chapter 9, The Octopus Spider offers the secret passage to the Red Castle. Xia Changqing looked at the golden robes whizzing by on horseback, and a trace of worry flashed through his heart. The golden robes increased their patrols. He increasingly believed that King's Landing was not a place to live forever. His ability to return the dead seemed powerful, but that was only for other powerful people. As for Xia Changqing himself, he was still fragile, and would be killed by a sword or a dagger. Littlefinger had to speed up his actions. The sooner Sansa was picked up, the sooner he could leave King's Landing. In a brothel, Littlefinger burned the letter in his hand with a candle, sighed in his heart, and began to strictly implement Xia Changqing's urging. In order to bring Sansa out of the Red Castle, Littlefinger still believed that he could not do without the help of the octopus spider Varys. in order to complete the order from Xia Changqing as soon as possible. Little Fina didn't mind Varys going into the water. Varys looked at the note in his hand. His face was calm, but his heart was in turmoil. The content of the note was very simple, with only one person's name on it, but just a name made Varys sweat on his forehead. Daenerys Targaryen. This was the name on the note, and the note was handed to him by petty Little Fina. What did Little Fina mean? Did he notice something? And what did he mean by giving him the note? Varys couldn't help but think wildly. Once this act of treason was exposed, it would be fatal. Although Varys was a eunuch, he didn't want to die so early. Therefore, Varys decided to meet Little Fina. Since Little Fina didn't expose the matter at the first time, it meant that there was still room for maneuver. The rest was just to see whether the conditions could satisfy the other party. With the help of the little bird, Varys easily found the brothel that Little Fina was going to tonight. The matter that Varys was about to discuss with Little Fina could not be known by another person, so Varys carefully chose not to bring anyone with him, and went to the brothel where Little Fina was alone. Because he lost his penis when he was young, Varys has always been reluctant to go to places like brothels. But now, he has to step into this place that he hates. Lord Varys, what a rare guest. Do you finally want to try what it feels like to be a man? Little Fina dismissed the prostitutes on both sides, and said to Varys teasingly with a familiar smile on his face. Lord Petty, you know I'm a eunuch. I hope you don't make fun of me about this. I will be very unhappy about it. Okay, I apologize to you, Lord Varys. I wonder what you are doing here? Looking at Little Fina's stupid look, Varys was a little unsure of what the other party was up to. When leaving the court, Lord Petty handed me a note with Daenerys Targaryen's name on it. I wonder what the Lord means. Varys put his hands in his sleeves and said softly. He didn't intend to play some guessing games with Little Fina. This was a very dangerous behavior. I don't mean anything else. I just hope you can come to my brothel. Little Fina sighed, his tone full of complexity. At the same time, Varys suddenly became alert. What did Little Fina mean? Did he deliberately frame himself here? What was his purpose? Varys' breathing suddenly stagnated. He saw a tall black shadow suddenly appear from behind the bed curtain. Varys, who had foreseen the danger, did not choose to run away or shout loudly. Instead, he quickly took out a small crossbow from his sleeve, wanting to kill him. Although the crossbow was small, it could kill people within 5 steps. Lord Little Fina, please let this strange friend stand still. Varys did not shake his body or his hands, and the crossbow arrow was steadily aimed at Little Fina's heart. Little Fina seemed not to see the crossbow in Varys' hand. The smile on his face did not change, and he did not say anything. Lord, Varys was puzzled. What did Little Fina mean? Did he think he didn't dare to shoot? Varys tilted his head slightly, and looked at the shadow, saying in a steady tone, strange friend, please stand still. Lord Petty's life is in your hands. Varys' threatening tone was not concealed. He hoped that the other party would be cautious. The shadow's footsteps paused, and before Varys could put his mind at ease, he immediately walked over again. Varys' eyes darkened for a moment. He didn't intend to make the relationship with Little Fina too stiff, but the other party's behavior tonight was really too much. Thinking of this, Varys slightly deflected the direction of the crossbow arrow, aimed at the shadow, and pulled the trigger directly. Swoosh, there was an imperceptible sound of breaking through the air, and the crossbow arrow passed through the curtain in the room, and sank into the body of the shadow. Varys was very sure that he had shot the other party. But why didn't the other party stop? Varys' hands trembled slightly. The shadow reached out, and lifted the curtain, revealing his true face. He had a face as firm as a rock, and a black crossbow arrow was stuck in his chest. Lord Eddard Stark. Varys screamed in shock, like a frightened little girl. Eddard nodded slightly and said, please, Lord Varys, go. What? Before Varys could make a sound of shock and anger, Eddard drew his sword in an instant, and there was a flash of sword light. In a flash, the tip of the sword had pierced Varys' somewhat fat body. Although there are many swordsmen in the 7 kingdoms, Eddard Stark can still be ranked in the top 10. Varys, who is not good at martial arts, is no match for Eddard. Half a quarter of an hour later, Varys smiled bitterly, and touched his chest, where there was a wound that had not yet completely healed. Lord Petty, you really made me suffer. Littlefingers' smile remained unchanged. Lord Varys, welcome to the team of the undead. Varys' fat face was full of bitter smiles. He looked at Eddard Stark, whose face was still cold and hard, and then looked at Xia Changqing, who was wearing black clothes and black robes with a hood covering his face. He didn't know what to say. He was still amazed that King Joffrey had captured 2 undead 2 days ago. Now he has the honor to become one of the undead. The world is really wonderful. Master, you want to rescue Lady Sansa from the Red Castle? I have a way. Varys slowly told a shocking secret about the Red Castle. The Red Castle is full of secret passages, and the octopus spider can go wherever it wants. Chapter 10 Little Devil. The sky was clear and cloudless. In the Red Keep of King's Landing, the Knights tournament held on the King's name day was in full swing. King Joffrey sat in the center, leaning back, watching the bloody battle between the 2 knights with interest. His Majesty has a special liking for this kind of activity. Sansa sat on the right-hand side of King Joffrey, staring blankly at the battle on the field, with no expression on her face. Since the death of her father Eddard, Sansa has slowly learned to conceal her expression. Showing the right expression at the right time is a compulsory course for survival in the Red Keep. While Sansa was daydreaming, the 2 sides of the battle on the field had already decided the winner. The loser was knocked down from the wall just now by a punch, which made Sansa involuntarily feel a little worried for this strange knight she was not familiar with. King Joffrey had already shouted who would be the next to play. A moment later, a fat and round knight who was late because of drinking came late. Joffrey laughed at his poor performance. He ordered the gold cloaks to bring a barrel of wine and pour it into the poor knight's mouth. Sansa couldn't bear it and wanted to plead for him, but she knew she couldn't say it directly, otherwise Joffrey would be even more furious. Your Majesty, today is your name day, and blood should not be shed. Look how beautiful Sansa's words are. Between the lines, she didn't mean to plead for the poor knight at all, but was thinking about Joffrey. But after hearing it, Joffrey was very happy and ordered the gold cloaks to let go of the poor fat knight. In just a few months, Sansa has grown from that naive noble lady to this point. I don't know if Eddard would be happy or sad if he could see this scene. The joust continued. Not long after, 2 people suddenly came to the city wall. The one walking in front was only as tall as an ordinary adult's thigh, with short arms and legs. His movements of climbing the steps of the city wall looked extremely ridiculous. But no one dared to laugh at the scene, because the visitor was the little devil of the honorary 7 kingdoms, Tyrion Lannister. Even though the little devil was not favored by Lord Tywin, he did have the surname and blood of Lannister, which was a fact that the gods in the sky could not deny. So to laugh at the little devil was to laugh at Lannister and Lord Tywin. Who dared to laugh at Lord Tywin and the entire Westeros? Lannister must pay his debts, and the rainy season of Castamere is sung in the 7 kingdoms. No one dared to offend the majesty of Lord Tywin. Cersei wished that the little devil would die now, and she had tried it when the little devil was a few years old. So after seeing the arrival of the little devil, Cersei's face suddenly changed, as ugly as if she had eaten a fly. Miss, I'm deeply sorry for what happened to your father. It's a pity that Sansa didn't believe the little devil, or she didn't believe anyone in the castle. So Sansa turned her head and looked at Joffrey and said, my father is a traitor. My mother and brother are also traitors. I'm absolutely loyal to my beloved King Joffrey. The little devil's expression was instantly confused. He didn't expect Sansa to say this. This was beyond his expectations. After a short stay, the little devil left the tower and went to the royal meeting. He was not here for sightseeing. To be honest, the little devil didn't like his sister and nephew at all, but his father's will could not be disobeyed. The little devil came to replace Duke Tywin as the prime minister, but Cersei and Joffrey didn't know it yet. At the royal meeting, the little devil sat on the main seat and took out the letter of appointment from Duke Tywin. Littlefinger, Varys, Grand Maester Pycelle and others deeply understood who was in charge of the power of King's Landing now. In name, the power belonged to King Joffrey, but everyone knew that the power belonged to Duke Tywin. No one expressed any objection. Anyway, this was all an internal matter of the Lannister family. Everyone present was smart and knew whose child Joffrey was. However, under the sword and shield, Joffrey was the most legitimate king of the 7 kingdoms, and no one could deny it. Among the important ministers in front of the king, there was only one person who did not want Little Devil to become the prime minister, and that was the regent Queen Mother Cersei, who wanted Little Devil to die. After the two of them had a verbal battle, Little Devil also knew that there was only one Stark in King's Landing now. Little Devil unabashedly despised his sister. Originally, there were 3 Starks who could have exchanged Jaime back, but because of your stupidity, there is only one left now. Although Cersei was very angry about Little Devil's sarcasm, she had no reason to refute it. Little Devil's words, "Go explain to your father," completely blocked Cersei's words. If Cersei still had someone to fear, then that person must be Lord Tywin. Little Devil's first meeting as Prime Minister ended unhappily because of a quarrel with Cersei. After the meeting, the Little Devil ran excitedly to find his newly hired prostitute. He loved this beauty named Xia very much. It made him feel like he was back to his first love. But the Little Devil didn't know that when he left, 2 people were watching his back calmly. "My lord, what do you think of the appointment of Sir Tyrion Lannister as the Hand of the King?" Little Fina still had a familiar smile on his lips. "I believe that Lord Tyrion will be a very competent prime minister." Varys faintly exuded the fragrance of powder, and his voice was gentle and low, just like telling love words to a lover's ear. "My lord, I wonder if you have heard about what happened on the top of the Red Castle?" "Lord Petty, just say what you want to say." After our prime minister came to the Red Castle, he first went to see Lady Sansa and expressed his regret to her. "What do you mean?" The smile on Little Fina's lips became even stronger. The prime minister cares so much about Lady Sansa, and Sir Jaime is still in the hands of the king in the north. Do you think he will release Lady Sansa from the Red Keep privately because he sympathizes with her and wants her to be exchanged for Sir Jaime? Oh. Varys also became interested. He thought for a while, but these reasons cannot support the prime minister to release Lady Sansa privately. No one will believe it. Varys was not optimistic about this statement, but Little Fina seemed very confident. Queen Cersei will believe it. Chapter 11, Sansa's Escape. The Red Castle, shrouded in the night, seemed extremely quiet and peaceful. Under normal circumstances, if there was no banquet, the Red Castle would be extremely quiet after nightfall. There was too little entertainment in this world at night, and the nobles were too reserved about their status to gamble and drink until dawn like the common people. Therefore, most of the nobles' nighttime activities were bed sports, such as in Meagher's tower, where Lancel Lannister had already climbed onto his cousin Cersei's bed early. In the days when Jaime was lost, Lancel, who was as handsome and charming as Jaime, became Jaime's substitute. He tried to satisfy Cersei's desires in bed and wanted to replace Jaime's position in Cersei's heart. But no matter what, Cersei and Lancel could not imagine that just across the wall from their room, a group of people were walking silently in the secret passage, and they could hear Cersei's screams clearly. If Cersei knew what happened, I wonder if she would jump off the Red Castle tower in shame. Xia Changqing didn't know, and he was not interested in knowing. That's right, the group of people who were walking in the secret passage in silence were Xia Changqing and his gang. After confirming that the Little Devil was responsible for Sansa's disappearance, Varys took Xia Changqing and Eddard to the Red Castle through the secret passage at night. The secret passages in the Red Castle are interconnected, and there are secret exits in every room. This secret exists in Varys' heart, which is undoubtedly a very scary thing. But for Xia Changqing and Eddard, this is a great help. Relying on these secret passages, they can take Sansa out of the Red Castle without anyone noticing. Varys did not move far in silence. In fact, Sansa's residence was not far from Cersei's room. Varys stepped forward and pressed the trigger, and a secret door embedded in the wall and perfectly integrated with the wall appeared. Looking at the secret door that shrank into the wall, Xia Changqing's eyes were full of surprise. He really couldn't imagine that this complex mechanism was a product of this era. The three of them passed through the secret door and appeared in a room. It was midnight and everyone was asleep. Eddard drew aside the curtains between the bed and saw Sansa sleeping soundly. The poor little girl dared to show her vulnerable side only at night. The tears in the corners of her eyes showed that Sansa was not as strong as she showed during the day. Eddard felt his heart aching. Although he would not feel much pain, even if his heart was taken away in his current state, he felt the heartache very clearly when he saw his daughter. Edit, we have to hurry up. Looking at Edit, who was stunned, Xia Changqing had to remind him and interrupted Edit's self-pity. Edit naturally understood that this place was not a long-term place. He took off his hood, squatted down, gently covered Sansa's mouth with his hand, and slowly shook her. Sansa was awakened by the noise from the outside world. When she opened her eyes, she saw a tall black shadow in front of her, which scared her to scream on the spot. Edit's decision to cover her mouth with his hand was very wise. Sansa, don't scream. It's me. Sansa suddenly heard this very familiar voice. She subconsciously stopped wanting to scream and looked at the person with wide eyes. How could Sansa forget that very familiar face? Dad. Sansa was excited and unbelievable. For a moment, the huge surprise enveloped her whole body, making her unable to help but throw herself into Ed's arms. Sansa, let's leave here first. Ed hugged his daughter and whispered, Dad, can we take Am with us? Sansa suddenly poked her head out of Ed's arms and asked anxiously. Sansa is indeed a kind child. When she was about to escape from the cage, she still did not forget the maid who shared the same suffering with her. Anne and Sansa came to King's Landing from Winterfell together, and then her father was killed in the Prime Minister's tower by the gold cloaks sent by Cersei. In the days after Ed was killed, it was Anne who accompanied Sansa and prevented her from collapsing. Dad, can we? Sansa asked again. But Ed had remained silent and cast his eyes on Xia Changqing, who was already standing at the entrance of the secret passage. Xia Changqing nodded silently. He was not a heartless person. If he did not take the little girl named Annie with him, when the people in the Red Castle found out that Sansa was missing tomorrow, they would definitely be angry with the little girl. Her miserable end could be easily imagined. After obtaining Xia Changqing's consent, Ed had put Sansa down and walked to the outer room. Annie and the maid sent by Cersei slept together in the outer room. Sansa stood still, looking at Xia Changqing with some fear and curiosity. Xia Changqing nodded to Sansa in a friendly way. He sighed in his heart. Sansa was just a little girl of 13 or 14 years old. Such a little girl lived in a place like the Red Castle, so it was no wonder that Ed was worried about her. Looking at Sansa, Xia Changqing couldn't help but think of Ed's other daughter, Arya Stark, who had wandered all the way and eventually grew up to be a faceless man. In the original plot of Game of Thrones, it was Arya who finally ended the Night King and saved the entire Westeros continent. I just don't know if Arya will still go the way of the faceless men under my influence. Xia Changqing thought to himself, and he suddenly had a very ridiculous idea. Maybe it was still Arya who would end him, the king of the undead. Before Xia Changqing thought too much, Ed had already led the trembling little maid Annie in from the outside, bringing with him a faint smell of blood. Xia Changqing looked at Ed with doubtful eyes. He could see that Ed's sword had been unsheathed and drunk blood. When I woke Annie up, I alarmed the other maids, Ed explained lightly. At this time, the little maid had already hugged Sansa together. The poor child still couldn't believe what was happening. 3 people came in, and 5 people left. Varys set the mechanism down again, and the secret door was closed, so that no flaws could be seen. The 5 people stumbled and hurried along, passing through the Red Keep, and entering the tunnel. Varys led the way with a torch. Soon after, everyone saw a ray of starlight shining into the tunnel. After exiting the tunnel, Sansa realized that they had left the Red Keep, and came to the seaside. Master, here. In the distance, 2 figures were holding torches and waving their arms in the direction of the crowd. Molly's and the other man had been waiting here for a long time. Chapter 12, Choice of Path. When it was discovered that Sansa and her maid had suddenly disappeared from the Red Castle, Xia Changqing and his party were already sailing on the vast sea, all the way north. King's Landing is located in the middle of Westeros, with the narrow sea behind it. Along the narrow coastline, you can sail north to the edge of the wall, but that is something that only large sailing ships can do. The small wooden boat that Xia Changqing and others were riding on could not sail on the sea for too long. As long as they encountered a small storm, they might be destroyed and killed. Including Xia Changqing, there were only 6 people on the boat, but just these 6 people made the boat seem crowded. Nestled beside her father, Sansa looked at Xia Changqing, who hid his figure under the black robe and hood, with some awe. From Edit, Sansa heard that Xia Changqing was a messenger sent by the god of the First Men, and that with the help of the god of the First Men, Eddard could be resurrected. The god of the First Men is the belief of all Northerners. Sansa believed Eddard's words without a doubt. She was only a 13 or 14-year-old child, and she had never doubted Eddard's words. Besides, if it wasn't for the power of the gods, how could Eddard come back to life? So Sansa didn't feel awkward about the other people on the ship obeying Xia Changqing's orders. My lord, should we sail to Dragonstone first? With our ship, it is difficult to support a long voyage. Moreover, Dragonstone is the fief of His Majesty Stannis, who is the only one with the legal right to inherit the Iron Throne. We can change ships at Dragonstone and then sail directly to White Harbor. Eddard made his suggestion at the right time. Everyone present could see that relying on this small boat, they didn't know how long it would take to reach the north. No, Eddard, we are not going to Dragonstone. Xia Changqing looked at Eddard in surprise. Have you forgotten what you did before you died? In front of all the residents of King's Landing, you personally acknowledged Joffrey's legitimacy. If you go to Dragonstone now, Stannis will never accept you. Xia Changqing smiled. Even if Eddard had died once and resurrected, he was still not suitable for politics. And as far as Xia Changqing knew, during this period, Robb Stark had already declared himself king, which was an unforgivable sin for Stannis. Going to Dragonstone at this time would only be courting death. Xia Changqing was not used to putting himself in danger, and in Xia Changqing's plan, he would use the Northern Army as the main fighting force, slowly resurrect the dead soldiers on the battlefield into undead, and then sweep across the entire Westeros continent. So Stannis was also one of his expected enemies. There would be a battle between the North and Stannis sooner or later. While thinking, Xia Changqing vaguely remembered that a believer of the Lord of Light, the Red Witch Melisandre, had come to Dragonstone. Although the gods in this world are not obvious, the existence of gods is beyond doubt. Whether it is Melisandre's ability to foresee the future in the flames, or later resurrecting the dead Jon Snow through prayers to the Lord of Light, these undoubtedly show that the gods can show their power in Westeros. Xia Changqing is still too weak now. He dare not bet whether Melisandre can see through him, or whether the Lord of Light will look at Xia Changqing through Melisandre's eyes. Being watched by a god is not a pleasant experience. After all, although Xia Changqing's purpose is different from that of the Night King, it is also a huge threat to the world of the living. He doesn't want to be treated as a believer of the cold god before he becomes strong. My lord, what should we do? Merys asked with a trace of worry on his face. This was Xia Changqing's request. He asked Eddard and the others to call him sir. The title of master was really unnecessary. Of course, Xia Changqing could not be approachable and call them brothers. Even if Xia Changqing had this intention, Eddard and the others would feel awkward. Let's sail north for a while, then we will go ashore and take the King's Road back to the north. Xia Changqing made the final decision. At this time, Arya, whom he had been thinking about, should be in the Night's Watch, heading towards the wall. If they were fast, they would have a chance to catch up with them before the Westerly army captured her. Sir, if we take the King's Road, I'm afraid there will be gold cloaks patrolling back and forth between the North and King's Landing. Eddard expressed his concerns. After all, he was once the Duke of Winterfell and the Prime Minister. He knew in his heart that Sansa's sudden disappearance from the Red Castle would cause a great uproar, and Joffrey would definitely send gold cloaks to search all the way to the north. If conditions did not allow it, sailing directly to White Harbor would be the best choice. Xia Changqing just shook his head and said confidently, Stannis of Dragonstone and Renly of Stormlands are both eyeing the Iron Throne in King's Landing. Under the threat of the two, King's Landing will not send too many people to arrest us. Eddard and others had no choice but to obey Xia Changqing's insistence. After all, they still had to obey Xia Changqing's orders. Xia Changqing's boat crossed the Blackwater Bay and abandoned the boat at Rosby, not far from King's Landing. Small boats also have their advantages. They can rush directly to the shallows without worrying about the ship running aground. But after leaving the boat, the rest of the journey has to be walked. This made Xia Changqing, who had lived a comfortable life since childhood, suffer enough. He had never walked such a long distance in a day. This was undoubtedly a torture for him. Even Sansa and the little maiden performed much better than Xia Changqing, which made Xia Changqing blush a little. However, Ed and others felt that Xia Changqing was more approachable. After Xia Changqing's feet were blistered, the group finally arrived at Rosby. The news of Ed's murder had spread throughout the Seven Kingdoms, while the news of Sansa's disappearance was kept secret by the Lannisters. So when Xia Changqing and his group arrived at Rosby, they did not encounter anyone in gold cloaks. This made Ed feel relieved, and taking his daughter with him on the road made him a little more worried. To be honest, if they really encountered a small group of gold cloaks, even if some of them were immortal, they would still be defeated miserably. After such a long period of contact, Ed had long discovered that Xia Changqing had no combat ability at all except for the witchcraft that could resurrect the dead. To be precise, Xia Changqing was just a weakling with a combat power of 5. Chapter 13 King's Row. The King's Road starts from King's Landing, goes north, passes through the Trident Basin, crosses the Neck and the Tomb of the First Men, and then arrives at Winterfell. It starts from Winterfell again, and connects to the Black Castle of the Wall. If you go south, you will go from King's Landing to Storm's End. The entire King's Road can be called a highway on the continent of Westeros, and is the most famous traffic artery. It's just a pity that there is no cement technology in this era, so in general, the King's Road is just a slightly regular dirt road. Xia Changqing and his party replenished supplies in Rosby City, and purchased a set of chainmail for each of Ed's 3 main combatants, equipped with a long sword, and Xia Changqing followed suit. It's just that Xia Changqing was very uncomfortable wearing a set of chainmail. He couldn't get used to putting on a heavy yoke on himself, so Ed chose the same leather armor for Xia Changqing as Sansa. Although the leather armor is light, it can also block some damage. Xia Changqing also had a long sword on his waist. With this outfit, he looked like an adventurer or mercenary. There were still a lot of gold dragons extorted from Littlefinger, so Xia Changqing and others bought a few more horses. If they only walked on foot, Xia Changqing didn't think he could reach the north after the War of the Five Kings. But what embarrassed him was that Xia Changqing didn't know how to ride a horse. Even Sansa and the little maiden rode on a horse alone, while Xia Changqing had to share a horse with Edition. Looking at Sansa and Anne snickering, Xia Changqing fell into autism. You country bumpkins, what's so great about riding a horse? Have you ever driven a car? Have you ever seen an airplane? Of course, Xia Changqing just complained about the above in his heart. He couldn't afford to get angry with a little girl like Sansa. Ed, Merys and the other 2 didn't dare to laugh at Xia Changqing. So along the way, Xia Changqing was not idle. He asked Ed for horse riding skills. He didn't want to experience this shameful experience of front and back positions for too long. One studied hard, and the other taught hard. When the group turned onto the King's Road, Xia Changqing had already mastered the skills of riding a horse. At least he could ride slowly on the horse. The only spectacular thing about the King's Road was the big trees winding on both sides of the road. Layers of tall trees lined up on both sides, and the lush branches and trunks were entangled and overlapped, and there was almost no sunlight. Beams of sunlight could only shine through the gaps between the leaves. Being in it was like being in a magical world, which was magnificent. There was no need for everyone to get off the road. As long as they kept going along the King's Road, they would reach Winterfell sooner or later. But Xia Changqing was concerned about Arya's situation, so he urged everyone to speed up. Ed and the others were originally concerned about Xia Changqing's riding skills, so they didn't speed up. Now that Xia Changqing took the initiative to ask, what else is there to say? Just run. After running, Xia Changqing looked at the trees on both sides that kept retreating. This was much more exciting than driving. The wind blew on his face, making Xia Changqing unable to open his eyes. After a short acceleration, Xia Changqing strongly asked everyone to slow down. Sansa and Anne, the 2 little girls, laughed even more happily. Slowly, more and more people walked on the King's Road. In order not to attract the attention of the Golden Robes, Xia Changqing and his group put on hoods and walked low-key. There were indeed more Golden Robes coming and going. I don't know if it was to search for Sansa's traces or to hunt down Robert's illegitimate son. This was not a good thing for Xia Changqing and others. It was just as Xia Changqing guessed. King's Landing was already actively preparing for war. Not many Golden Robes were sent out. Most of them were in groups of 2, and at most a team of 4 or 5 people. For Xia Changqing's team, it was not a worry. Just out of caution, Xia Changqing did not provoke these golden robes. They advanced during the day and set up camp at the edge of the King's Road at night. In just a few days, they were far away from King's Landing. That night, Eddard and his companions had just set up camp and were preparing dinner when suddenly a cavalry team came running from a distance. The cavalrymen were wearing black armor and red robes behind them, and each of them held a torch in his hand. Through the faint light of the torches, Xia Changqing recognized at a glance that these were soldiers from Lannister in the west. Cavalry from the west. In a flash, a memory emerged in Xia Changqing's mind. The team Eria was caught up by the cavalry from the west, and the Night's Watchman Yoren died at the hands of these cavalry. Xia Changqing didn't know if the cavalry that caught up with the Night's Watch was this one, and he didn't know when the two met, so Xia Changqing didn't bet at all. He jumped down from the tree stump at the edge of the King's Road and shouted directly, "Ed, pack up your things. Let's catch up with the cavalry in front." "What? My lord, that's the Lannister army. We can't hide from them." Merys stopped what he was doing and shouted immediately. Xia Changqing trotted forward, jumped up and kicked Merys. "You are the only one who talks too much. Didn't you hear my order? Ed, don't want these things. Hurry up and take the horses. Let's go." Under Xia Changqing's mandatory order, Merys no longer objected. Ed and others simply packed up, put out the fire, threw away most of the things that they didn't have time to pack, and then got on the horse and chased after the westerly cavalry. Xia Changqing was also well aware of his poor riding skills, so in order to speed up the overall speed of the team, he didn't care about shame or not, and directly let Ed hug him and ride on the same horse. The King's Road at night was even darker and more ghostly. If possible, no one would choose to pass the King's Road at night. So the westerly cavalry in front definitely had something to do. "Sir, you haven't told us yet. What are we going to do with the cavalry from the Westerlands?" "This is not a wise choice. The other side has at least 30 or 40 fully armed cavalrymen." Eddard's slightly worried words rang in Xia Changqing's ears. He didn't want his daughter to get into trouble. This was Eddard's deepest thought. Once the battle started, although he had an immortal body, he couldn't fight the enemy and take care of Sansa's safety at the same time. Xia Changqing curled his lips. He heard Eddard's thoughts deep in his heart. This man with thick eyebrows and big eyes was most concerned about his daughter's safety at a critical moment. But this is also human nature. Xia Changqing would not blame Eddard for anything. "Let's go save your other daughter." Xia Changqing said so. Chapter 14. Dark Night. The cavalry team running fast on the King's Road was led by Amory Lorch, the second most evil man in the west after the Mountain. Amory was a wealthy knight who worked for Lord Tywin at a very young age. In the battle against the Mad King, Amory did as much evil as the Mountain. Although Amory was very famous in the west, few people in the Seven Kingdoms had heard of Amory's name. This made Amory jealous of the Mountain to the point of madness. This was a thoroughly evil man who regarded doing evil as his honor. The reason why Amory chased the Night's Watch this time can be traced back to King Joffrey's order to kill all the illegitimate children of the former King Robert. And Gendry, who was now following Yoren and preparing to go to the Wall, was one of Robert's illegitimate children. The Gold Cloaks found out this and threatened Yoren to hand over Gendry. But how could Yoren surrender to the Gold Cloaks? The Gold Cloaks were frustrated by Yoren, so they would not be willing to let it go. Amory was about to march to Harrenhal, passing through the King's Road. He did not mind solving this small hidden danger for King Joffrey. "Sir, we have found traces of the Night's Watch ahead." The scouts who explored the way sent back the information Amory wanted. "Raise the flag and kill them all." Amory licked his dry lips. After a day of forced march, he finally caught up with Yoren's Night's Watch. Behind Amory, a golden lion flag and a lion body scorpion-tailed flag were raised. The cavalrymen following Amory drew their swords and put their arrows on the strings. "What kind of general you have, what kind of soldiers you have." The soldiers following Amory were all murderers and arsonists, and they regarded it as their honor. The cavalry approached the camp where the Night's Watch was stationed. The chief of the Night's Watch, Yoren, was not a gentleman. He drew his sword and went forward alone, without any fear on his face. Swoosh! The sharp arrow broke through the air, and the sound was sharp. Ugh! Yoren groaned, looked down, and saw that his chest had been hit by an arrow. The Amorites had no intention of showing mercy. Slightly slow, Yoren was hit by another arrow, but he did not die for a while. He roared violently in his throat and rushed towards the Western cavalry. The battle started, and the sound of slashing and screaming was endless. Fires were everywhere around the camp, and everyone was panicked. On one side were regular soldiers from the Western Territory, and on the other side were ordinary people who had not yet joined the Night's Watch. The battle was just beginning, and the Night's Watch was already in disarray. At this time, Xia Changqing and his party had also followed the Amorite army to the scene. My lord, that seems to be Yoren's Night's Watch. What should we do? Eddard had already drawn his sword, and was about to charge. Yoren was his friend, and the two had known each other for a long time. Now that his friend was in trouble, if he stood by and watched, he would not be called Eddard Stark. But he had no choice now, so before rushing out, Eddard had to ask Xia Changqing's opinion. Xia Changqing looked at the burning fire in the distance and the westerly cavalry riding horses to chase civilians, and his hands could not help but clench. How could Xia Changqing, who had received positive energy education, remain indifferent to such indiscriminate killing of innocent people? Sansa and stay here, and take care of yourself. Eddard, do whatever you want to do. Eddard looked at Xia Changqing's approving eyes, pursed his lips, and kicked the horse's belly fiercely. Go. 1 horse against 1,000. Eddard rushed towards the westerly cavalry without hesitation. Merys, you two go and help Eddard. Yes, sir. Merys and the other two drew their swords and followed Eddard. Although the two men's swordsmanship was sparse, they could still cause some trouble to the westerly cavalry by relying on their immortal bodies and exchanging injuries. Xia Changqing looked at the figures of Eddard and the other two leaving. To be honest, he was still afraid of such a battle. However, after coming to this world for such a long time, Xia Changqing did not gain anything else, but his psychological quality was much tougher. At least he would not be frightened by such a scene. Sansa, you two protect yourselves. I will help Eddard and the others. Xia Changqing ordered Sansa, and the two girls nodded obediently and rode their horses to hide in the dark. Xia Changqing kicked the horse's belly lightly and approached the battlefield cautiously. Because of Eddard's sudden rise, the cavalry under the Amorites quickly reorganized their troops after killing several people and began to besiege Eddard and the other two. As for the civilians, who were originally being hunted, they were safe. The attention of the Western cavalry was all attracted by Ed and the other two. Originally, the Western cavalry did not take the three strangers who suddenly rushed out to attack seriously. Although their sudden attack caused a small number of casualties on their side, after they reacted, with more than 40 people against 3 people, how could the Dragon cavalry lose? Looking at the Western cavalry attracted by Ed and the other two, Xia Changqing got off his horse and sneaked into the Night Watch camp. He didn't dare to fight head on, but he could pat his chest and say that he was good at doing some tricks behind the scenes. The person lying dead next to Xia Changqing was the chief Raven Yoren, who had been besieged to death. Return of the Dead. Xia Changqing touched Yoren and activated the skill. After a tremor, he felt bored. Yoren had already grabbed the sword and climbed up from the ground. Ah, damn it, am I not dead? I really saw a White Walker. Why are you yelling? Keep your voice down. Xia Changqing slapped Yoren in the face. He didn't want to attract the Westerland cavalry. Yoren's eyes glared, and he was about to blurt out a sweet mouthful of sweet words. Then Xia Changqing also glared, and in the end Yoren was defeated and swallowed all the sweet words in his stomach. What are you doing here? Hurry up and help Eddard and the others. Xia Changqing couldn't help but slap Yoren again. He was a civilized man and couldn't stand Yoren's sweet words. Yoren responded with some grievance, and then his face immediately showed surprise again. Eddard is here too? Didn't he have his head chopped off? As soon as Yoren said this, he immediately realized his current state. Since he could be resurrected, it was not surprising that Eddard could also be resurrected. Ed, I'll help you. Yoren shouted. His body was still full of arrows, but he didn't feel it, and he dragged his sword to join the battle. Amori was horrified, and he killed Yoren with his own hands, but in the blink of an eye, Yoren actually jumped back into the battle. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 15 Father and Daughter Meet. As Yulan joined the battle, Xia Changqing was not idle either. He found several bodies of Western cavalry killed by Yulan. Return of the Dead. Return of the Dead. Xia Changqing used skills on several bodies non-stop, resurrecting them and letting them join the battle. What Xia Changqing did not expect was that the system that had been silent for a long time suddenly popped up. Return of the Dead LV2, 0%. Xia Changqing had never noticed that the skill experience of Return of the Dead had reached the maximum level and reached the second level. The effect of the second level of Return of the Dead skill also appeared in Xia Changqing's mind instantly. His skill casting range no longer required touching the corpse with his hands, but was a circle with a radius of 1 meter centered on his body. Although this casting range was also very small, it was undoubtedly good news for Xia Changqing. He had long been dissatisfied with having to touch the bloody corpse with his hands every time he released a skill. Xia Changqing waved his hand, and the Western cavalry corpse lying at his feet stood up automatically, and then joined the battle under his will. Amari's heart was undoubtedly broken when he saw his men, who were supposed to be dead, stand up from the ground and swing their swords at them. Amari knew that he was in big trouble. This abnormal phenomenon reminded Amari of species that had disappeared from the Westeros continent for thousands of years. White Walkers. The dead are resurrected. The number of people on his side was getting smaller and smaller, while the number of people on the other side was getting larger and larger. How could this battle be fought? Amari gathered the surviving men. He had already decided to retreat. He was going to report the matter here to Lord Tywin. Xia Changqing's act of resurrecting the dead had already caught Amari's attention. Even in the dark, Xia Changqing was still so conspicuous. But now Xia Changqing no longer had to worry about Amari launching a decapitation operation against him. Around him, there were more than a dozen resurrected Westerland cavalrymen tightly surrounding him to protect him. The unknown was terrifying. Even a villain like Amari felt fear in his heart. Let's retreat, back to Harrenhal. Amari waved his hand, ready to slip away. My lord, it seems we can't leave. Amari's flag bearer said in a trembling voice. A group of cavalrymen were surrounding them. Those who should have been their comrades in arms were now facing each other with swords, and most importantly, those people should have been dead. No one can be spared. This was the order Xia Changqing gave to his undead. It was too early, and he didn't want his secret to be exposed to the eyes of the big men of the Seven Kingdoms. So no one present could leave. The counter-encirclement and suppression began. The combat capabilities of the Western Border Cavalry were originally on par, and now those resurrected by Xia Changqing were all fearless and fearless. The situation of the battle was reversed, and now it was the Amari side that was suppressed. From the beginning to the end of this battle, it took more than an hour, and the cavalry brought by Amari was completely wiped out. Then these cavalrymen were resurrected by Xia Changqing, and lined up neatly behind him. War is indeed the best way to quickly expand strength. Xia Changqing sighed in his heart. It was just a small battle, but his men had expanded several times. These cavalrymen were the first batch of his troops to control the entire Westeros continent. Amari was also beheaded by Yoren with a sword under the joint siege of Eddard and Yoren, avenging his death. For Amari, a famous villain, Xia Changqing did not choose to resurrect him. At this point, all the battles were over. The resurrected Westerland cavalrymen were all injured, their armor was tattered, and they were in a mess, but they were still alive, and standing in the same place, and only Amari was lying on the ground. The civilians in the original Night's Watch were all stunned and terrified. They knelt on the ground and trembled. Their poor knowledge made them have no idea what happened. Sir, what should we do with these people? Merys came to Xia Changqing with a sword in hand. He was responsible for gathering these civilians. The tip of the sword hanging on the ground was still dripping with blood. Merys was already bloodshot, and his words were full of murderous intent. Era, where are you? Era. Suddenly, Eddard's excited voice sounded. After a fierce fight, he stopped to reminisce with Yoren. Then Yoren slapped his head and suddenly remembered that Era was also in his team. The scene was so chaotic, and he didn't know if Era was okay. Eddard was anxious when he heard it. He had died once, but he didn't want his daughter to die again. So Eddard didn't care about Xia Changqing's thoughts and came out of the crowd, shouting Aria's name. In the Night's Watch, Aria, dressed like a tomboy, was kneeling beside the tall and strong Gendry, hiding her figure, but suddenly heard someone calling her name. Hearing this extremely familiar voice, Aria suddenly stood up excitedly, so that Gendry couldn't catch her. "Dad, is that you?" Standing under the fire, Eddard had taken off his hood, revealing his face. The familiar face was right in front of her. Aria didn't care about the danger she was in. She ran out of the crowd excitedly and threw herself into Eddard's arms, shouting "Dad" while crying loudly. After being made such a scene by Eddard and his daughter, Merys's murderer saw her instantly dissipated. He scratched his head speechlessly. Why did Eddard Stark have so many daughters? He could meet them everywhere. My lord, how should we deal with these people? Let them go? Merys asked Xia Changqing for his opinion. Xia Changqing touched his chin. Although the combat effectiveness of this Night's Watch team was very weak, there were many powerful people hidden among them. Arya Stark, daughter of Eddard Stark, Duke of Winterfell. Gendry, the only surviving son of Robert Baratheon. Jaqen H'ghar, the top killer of the Faceless Men. Compared to these people like Rorge and Fang Fang are just small figures. Especially Jaqen, whose ability to change his appearance is amazing. Xia Changqing is also very yearning for it. Gather these people together, put them in the carriage, and let them follow us to Winterfell. Yes, sir. Merys received the order and immediately led the cavalry that originally belonged to the Westerlands and now belonged to Xia Changqing personally to drive the civilians onto the carriage. Although the Westerlands cavalry felt aggrieved, they had to obey Xia Changqing's orders. The civilians who knelt on the ground, including Jaqen and Rorge, had to accept their fate and get on the carriage under the sword and return to the cage. Chapter 16. Trap Jaqen. The night passed, and the light came. The team heading to the north set foot on the King's Road again. Xia Changqing rode leisurely on his horse, guarding Eddard and Euron beside him. Arya was held in her father's arms, not afraid of strangers at all, staring at Xia Changqing with wide eyes and curiosity. Xia Changqing also took off his hood, revealing a sunny face. He smiled at Arya, which made the girl stunned. Xia Changqing's appearance was completely different from what Arya imagined. She originally thought that Xia Changqing would be an old man with wrinkles on his face and a gloomy expression. She didn't expect him to be so young and even good looking. Around the team were cavalrymen who had abandoned their red cloaks and the flags of the West. They circled the team and made the civilians who were originally heading to the Great Wall stay in the carriages honestly. Xia Changqing patted his head and suddenly remembered that he had forgotten to do something. Under the protection of Eddard and Euron, Xia Changqing rode to the back of the team and met Jaqen H'ghar. Even in the cage, Jaqen behaved as if he was at home. He sat in the corner with a calm and natural look. He was very different from Sharptooth and Rorge. Although they were both fearless people, they still trembled after Xia Changqing looked at them, and there was fear in their eyes. Jaqen H'ghar? Xia Changqing asked, and he only had Jaqen in his eyes. Jaqen was tall, with long hair that was half white and half red, well dressed, and handsome. In theory, this was a person who could attract a lot of attention, but if Xia Changqing hadn't come to him specifically, it would be easy to ignore Jaqen. My lord, someone's friends are hard to find, and I don't remember your friend. Jaqen looked at Xia Changqing with a smile on his face, and looked at Xia Changqing in confusion. The Faceless Men have no names, so they all call themselves someone. Xia Changqing looked at Jaqen with interest. He was obviously the best killer in the world, but he was still caught by the golden cloaks of King's Landing, and imprisoned in the Black Prison. In Xia Changqing's opinion, the restrictions on the Faceless Men were too great. They were obviously powerful, but they could not attack others at will. Jaqen, do you want to live? Xia Changqing asked. My life is short, but my time has not come. It's just that, although I want to live, I don't want to become a Night's Watchman. To become a Night's Watchman, you have to take an oath. For people like the Faceless Men who attach great importance to oaths and promises, the oath of becoming a Night's Watchman is an unbearable price for them. Although Jaqen can abandon this name and escape with death, it is not so easy to give up a name casually. I won't let you become a Night's Watchman. Just work for me, and I'll let you go. Someone won't work for anyone. Jaqen laughed. Someone can kill for you. Tell someone a name, a king, a commoner, a knight, or a lord. Maybe a month, maybe a year, and death will come when the name comes out. One life for another. Sir, do you want to tell me a name? Jaqen's calm voice made Eddard and Yoren beside Xia Changqing change their faces. Eddard had only seen Jaqen in his life, which reminded him of mysterious organization. Sir, this man is not trustworthy. I suspect he is a member of the Faceless Men. Eddard whispered to Xia Changqing's ear. Although he had never seen the Faceless Men, as the Duke of Winterfell and the Guardian of the North, he had heard of the Faceless Men. Although the cost of hiring the Faceless Men was extremely huge, the power of the Faceless Men was deeply rooted in the hearts of the nobles of Westeros. The Faceless Men brought only death and destruction. Eddard was facing a formidable enemy. He drew his sword and pointed it at Jaqen. Although there was a cage between them, Eddard did not feel safe at all. The Faceless Man's ability to poison was hard to guard against. Jaqen did not expect Eddard to guess his origins, but he did not care. Jaqen could see who was the leader of this group of people. So Jaqen did not even look at Eddard and continued to stare at Xia Changqing's eyes. Sir, do you want to tell someone a name? Jaqen, are you the Faceless Man? Although Xia Changqing had confirmed Jaqen's identity, he still wanted Jaqen to admit his identity in person. Sir, someone is the nameless person. Very good, Jaqen. I'm not going to tell you a person's name. I want you to give me the skills of the Faceless Man. Xia Changqing put forward his own request. He was still very jealous of the Faceless Man's ability to change his face at will. It was simply a magical skill. Hearing Xia Changqing's request, Jaqen's face trembled slightly, and he looked at Xia Changqing. My lord is not a believer of the thousand-faced god. Is this a rejection? Xia Changqing looked at Jaqen with ill intentions, which made Jaqen suddenly feel a little nervous. You swear, as long as I say a name, death will surely befall him. Someone swears. Jaqen breathed a sigh of relief in vain, and thought of his nervousness just now. He felt funny in his heart. Someone swears in the name of the thousand-faced god. If your lord's name comes out, death will come, and I will not break the oath. Jaqen, anyone can do it? Xia Changqing's smile became more and more, and he relied on his familiarity with the plot to dig a pit for Jaqen step by step. It can be a king or a beggar, as long as your lord says a name. Okay, I'll say a name. Come closer. Xia Changqing leaned close to Jaqen's ear and said word by word in a voice that only Jaqen could hear. Jaqen Hagar. That's right. Xia Changqing said Jaqen's own name. Death comes when the name comes out. Jaqen, who had been calm and peaceful, suddenly trembled, and his face turned pale, as if he had been punched out of thin air, causing his body to tremble. My lord, perhaps, you can change your name. Jaqen Hagar. Xia Changqing's lips moved slightly, and he said it again silently. My lord. Jaqen's smile finally couldn't be maintained, and his eyes revealed a hint of request. My lord, can you change your name? No. Xia Changqing shook his head firmly. Either you teach me the power of the Faceless Man, or let death fall on someone's head. My lord, someone can't let you gain the power of the Faceless Man, and you are not a believer of the thousand-faced god. Jaqen still gave the same reason, but Xia Changqing was unmoved. Chapter 17 All Men Are Mortal. In the original plot, it was Eri who saved the lives of Jaqen and the other two who were imprisoned in the cage. So Jaqen gave Eri 3 names. After Jaqen killed the first 2, Eri said the third name, Tywin Lannister. But at that time, Tywin had already left Harrenhal and went to Casterly Rock. Eri was dissatisfied and told Jaqen his name. This directly grasped Jaqen's life-gate, leaving Jaqen helpless. After Eri and others escaped from Harrenhal with the help of Jaqen, Jaqen gave Eri a coin, which was also the opportunity for Eri to go to Bravos later. Eri later became a powerful Faceless Man, not only avenged the Stark family, but also ended the Night King in the end and saved Westeros. But if Eri became a believer in the thousand-faced god, Xia Changqing would never believe it, because Eri's subsequent performance can be said to have no faith in the thousand-faced god. But Eri still became a powerful Faceless Man. Since Eri can do it, why can't Xia Changqing do it? Maybe Eri was chosen by the thousand-faced god to participate in the struggle between the god of cold and the lord of light, but Xia Changqing believed that, since there were already exceptions, He would not be an exception. Jaqen, you have no choice. Xia Changqing ignored Jaqen's pleas and continued to put pressure on him. Sir, someone promised you. Please take back that name. Xia Changqing was proud of himself. Sure enough, as long as the method was right, even the powerful faceless man would succumb. However, Xia Changqing also had a trace of vigilance in his heart. If someone asked the faceless man to assassinate him, Xia Changqing really had no confidence that he could survive. Not to mention the faceless man's superb use of poison, their ability to change their appearance, voice, and body shape in an unpredictable way was enough to make people unable to guard against it. Someone who might have been a close person the day before might have been disguised by the faceless man today. It was terrifying to think about such a thing. Okay, I take back that name. Seeing Jaqen agree, Xia Changqing took it back very happily. The faceless men also have moral integrity, and they can't go back on their words. Jaqen was really relieved this time. He showed a bitter smile on his lips. He didn't expect Xia Changqing to catch the loophole in his promise, and forced him to agree to Xia Changqing's request. Thank you, sir. But someone didn't lie. Someone didn't teach you the ability to become a faceless man. Xia Changqing's face remained unchanged, waiting for Jaqen's next words. Jaqen took out a coin from his waist pocket, handed the coin out of the cage, and into Xia Changqing's hands. Sir, if you want to learn the skills of the faceless men, just take this coin, take a ship to Bravos, and say to the captain, all mortals must die, and they will take you to the black and white court, where you will find what you need. All mortals must die. This is a sentence spoken in Valyrian, which corresponds to all mortals must be worshipped. Xia Changqing put the coin in his arms with the utmost importance. I understand. Then, sir, can someone leave? Jaqen's face returned to calmness. He looked at Xia Changqing calmly. He had already sent a token to join the Black and White Academy, but whether Xia Changqing could be accepted by the monks of the Black and White Academy was not his business. Ed, let him go. Under Xia Changqing's order, Ed had to step forward and open the cage. In fact, according to Ed's idea, it would be safer to lock a dangerous person like the faceless man in a cage, or it would be better to kill him with a sword. In fact, Xia Changqing just had this ability. He killed Jaqen first, and then resurrected Jaqen. In this way, he would not only have one more faceless man subordinate, but also let Jaqen teach him how to become a faceless man. However, Xia Changqing did not dare to take this risk. To deal with people like Littlefinger and Varys, Xia Changqing dared to directly use his dirty hands, because he knew that people like Littlefinger were still ordinary people except for their high positions and power. However, Jaqen was different. As a mysterious faceless man, he had his own power. No one knew what kind of trump card Jaqen had. Xia Changqing had no doubt that Jaqen had the ability to kill him in an instant, but he was not sure that Eddard and the others could kill Jaqen. Jaqen walked out of the cage slowly, and even had the leisure to tidy up his clothes. He faced Eddard's sword tip without changing his expression. My lord, I'm very grateful for giving me freedom again. Goodbye. Jaqen saluted Xia Changqing gracefully. Although he was unarmed, he ignored the black armored cavalry around him. Jaqen slowly left Xia Changqing's team, and walked down the King's Road. No one noticed that Jaqen's face with his back to the crowd had changed. He was no longer Jaqen Hagar. My lord, are you just letting him go? Eddard asked unwillingly. We have more than 40 cavalrymen. Can't we keep him? Eddard, Jaqen is not our enemy. Just let him go. Don't make trouble. Let's rush to the north as soon as possible. There was no need. Xia Changqing didn't want to provoke Jaqen, the faceless man. Sir, we are also willing to kill for you. Please give us a chance. Just as Xia Changqing was about to leave, Rorge and Sharp Fang shouted loudly in the cage. Jaqen's departure gave them hope of freedom. Xia Changqing paused as he was leaving, and he looked at the two people in the cage with interest. Kill for me? But I don't lack people who can kill for me. It doesn't matter whether you are there or not. Sir, I'm not bragging. With these cavalry, Sharp Fang can deal with 3 or 4 by himself. Rorge pointed at Sharp Fang and shouted loudly, his tone full of disdain for the cavalry in the west. Of course, there may be a factor of self-praise in this, but Raj believes that as long as Xia Changqing gives them a chance, the two can definitely prove their ability. Xia Changqing didn't care much about the fighting ability of these two people, but the two looked like evil people, fierce enough to stop children from crying at night. Since you want to work for me, I'm not an unkind person, but I ask you again, do you really want to work for me? Sir, it's our honor to serve you, Luoji said quickly, and he glared at Sharp Fang, making Sharp Fang nod hurriedly. Okay, then I'll give you a chance. Ed, kill them. Xia Changqing directly ordered to kill the two. Chapter 18, The Plan at the Magic Mountain. The team heading to the north continued to move forward. Raj and Fang also got their freedom as they wished, but there were no extra horses in the team, so they could only squeeze into the carriage. This can also be regarded as a manifestation of freedom. The team had been marching for only half a day when Ed had said to Xia Changqing, Sir, Irenhil is not far ahead. I have confirmed with the cavalry of the Westerland that the person entrenched in Irenhil is the first evil man in the 7 kingdoms, the mountain, and Duke Tywin will lead the army to Irenhil soon. Should we take a detour? The first evil man in the 7 kingdoms, the mountain? Xia Changqing asked with interest. Eddard, are you afraid of this mountain? Afraid of the mountain? Sir, don't joke. Eddard said with some displeasure on his face. I'm the guardian of the north, the Duke of Winterfell. How can I be afraid of a mere mountain? But the mountain is notorious after all, and we don't know how many guards there are in Irenhil. It's better to take a detour. Detour? Xia Changqing would be lying if he said he wasn't tempted by Ed's proposal. With so few men, he didn't have the ability to go head to head with Tywin. But now Tywin was not in Irenhil, and the mountain was leading only a small number of soldiers. Xia Changqing wanted to take a chance. Ed, if I want to take Irenhil, how sure are you? I'm not sure. Ed said sincerely. Xia Changqing looked at Ed's serious face, which was like frozen stone in the north, and was speechless. This was too honest. Ed, don't be afraid. Xia Changqing patted Ed's shoulder. Even if your heads are chopped off by the mountain, I can help you put them back together. Don't worry. If even your head is chopped off, who can help you put it back together? Ed was still unwilling to take the risk of attacking Irenhil. This was too risky. They had too few people who could fight. Okay, I'll listen to you. We won't take the initiative to attack Irenhil. Although Xia Changqing could force Ed to order him, Ed was doing it for his own good in this matter, so there was no need to act arbitrarily. But Ed, have you ever thought about letting the mountain take the initiative to attack us? It's true that Irenhil is easy to defend, but difficult to attack, but we won't attack Irenhil at all, but let the mountain lead the army to fight. Xia Changqing thought in his mind that they didn't need to go head to head with the mountain. The mountain will definitely leave troops to defend Irenhil. In this way, his already small number of troops will be divided into 2 places, and the number of troops he can bring out will be even smaller. The more Xia Changqing thought about it, the more he thought about it, and a smile appeared on his face. When the time comes, we will be at ease, and kill the mountain by surprise. Even if his troops are twice as many as ours, I'm sure I can eat up the mountain's troops. After listening to Xia Changqing's talk, Ed suddenly felt that there was something to be done. He didn't agree to cause trouble for the mountain, partly because Irenhil was easy to defend, but difficult to attack, and partly because the other side had too many troops. If the mountain could really lead his troops out of the city to fight, Ed would have more confidence. But sir, how could the mountain follow our wishes and take the initiative to go out of the city to fight? Ed was puzzled. Hearing this, Xia Changqing pointed at the black armored cavalry surrounding them. Ed, who are these people? The cavalry under the Amorites. Ed replied. Yes, these people are cavalrymen under the command of Amory, and they are also members of the Westerlands. I don't know what the relationship between Amory and the mountain is, but if I send a rider to Irenhil and tell the mountain that Amory has been attacked and urgently needs support, do you think the mountain will come? If the mountain has a bad relationship with the Amory and sits back to watch the defeat of the Amory, then Duke Tywin will force the mountain to do it. As colleagues in the Westerlands, if the mountain sits back and watches the distress of the Amory, Duke Tywin will never let the mountain go. And who is the mountain? I admit that his military power is unmatched in the 7 kingdoms, but I don't think his intelligence is the best in the 7 kingdoms. Brains are a good thing. Xia Changqing made the final summary. This is doable. Damn it, I have disliked the mountain for a long time, and this is a good opportunity to kill him. You're uncursed aside. The mountain is the strongest, most vicious, and has the most enemies in the 7 kingdoms. My lord, you are right. If the mountain has a brain, he is not the mountain. If you insist, I'm willing to obey you. After thinking about it for a while, Ed had also agreed with Xiaji's idea. After the leaders made a decision, the next step was to implement the plan. Xia Changqing and Ed had selected a cavalryman who looked particularly miserable and had experienced a fierce battle from more than 40 Westerland cavalrymen and sent him to Hirenhal. Under Xia Changqing's absolute control, he didn't have to worry about the cavalry betraying them at all. Coming down the King's Road, before reaching the Trident River Basin, Hirenhal is located on the hillside not far from the King's Road. As the largest castle in Westeros, Hirenhal plays a role in guarding the road between the North and King's Landing. So Tywin specially sent his best dog, the Mountain, to capture Hirenhal and wait for his arrival. At this time, Duke Tywin had not arrived at Hirenhal. The Mountain and his men stayed in the castle, torturing the captives every day for fun, but they were also happy to do so. The cavalry sent by Xia Changqing galloped all the way to Hirenhal, breaking the peaceful atmosphere. Lord Gregor, I'm a cavalryman under Lord Damary. We were attacked by the Night's Watch on the King's Road. They suddenly launched a sneak attack, resulting in heavy casualties among the brothers. Lord Damary sent his subordinates to ask Lord Gregor for support. The cavalryman knelt at the feet of the Mountain and pleaded urgently. The Mountain sat on the chair like a giant. After listening to the words of the cavalryman, he laughed happily. Amary sent you to ask me for support. Haha, he will have this day too. As Xia Changqing guessed, the Mountain and Amary did not get along well. Now that the Mountain heard Amary's request for help, he was happy in his heart, and it was naturally revealed on his face, without hiding his ridicule for Amary. My lord, please, for the sake of Lord Tywin, lead your troops to rescue our lord. The Mountain's face suddenly changed. He made it clear that he didn't want to save Amary. The two of them didn't get along well and had many frictions in the west. Now there was such a good opportunity to kill Amary. The Mountain was very happy to see this scene. Chapter 19. Twists and turns. The Mountain sends out troops. The Mountain sat on the chair with a big sword and had no intention of sending troops. Boy, since you came back alive, it's your luck. Go down. The Mountain waved his hand and planned to send the cavalry. He had no intention of rescuing American Englisher. The cavalry kneeling at the feet of the Mountain was dumbfounded. If the Mountain did not send troops, his mission would not be completed, and Xia Changqing's order to him was to make sure that the Mountain sent troops. Thinking of this, the cavalry gritted his teeth and did not obey the Mountain's order to retreat. Sir, you and Lord American Englisher are both subordinates of Duke Tywin. If Lord American Englisher really has an accident, and the Duke knows that it is because you stood by and watched, I think you will not get any benefit. As soon as the cavalry finished speaking, the air in the room seemed to solidify. The Mountain was stunned for a moment, and he immediately became furious. I will twist your head off. The Mountain was furious and wanted to kill. He stretched out his big hand like a palm leaf fan and instantly grabbed the cavalryman's head. As long as the Mountain exerted force, the cavalryman's head would explode like a watermelon in an instant. Wait a minute, sir. Suddenly someone on the side spoke to stop the Mountain. The Mountain turned his head with murderous intent and looked at his confidant, Sweetmouth Raff. If Raff could not give him an explanation, the Mountain would not mind crushing one more head today. The evil deeds of the Mountain were too numerous to list. When he was a child, he killed his father and sister one after another because the two of them refuted the Mountain verbally. When the Mountain's brother, the Hound, was a child, he played with a toy that the Mountain had long since abandoned, so he pressed the Hound into the brazier and rubbed it, causing the Hound's half face to be disfigured and lost an ear. How could such a person who could kill his own relatives without hesitation care about the life and death of a subordinate? In fact, Sweetmouth Raff regretted it a little after he spoke, but he was not afraid that the Mountain would kill him. Sweetmouth Raff madly worshipped the Mountain and could die for the Mountain without hesitation. My lord. Sweetmouth Raff knelt down in front of the Mountain. My lord, I think what the cavalryman said is right. If you sent troops to rescue Lord Amory, wouldn't it show that you are the most courageous person in the eyes of Lord Tywin? Amory's failure completely highlights your courage. This will not only save you from the punishment of the Lord Duke, but also enhance your importance. Sweetmouth Draff was indeed completely for the sake of the mountain. How could it be possible? The mountain and his gang of men were all reckless and reckless. Sweetmouth Draff could be said to be the only one who was willing to use his brain. I want Amory to die. The mountain was unhappy. He still didn't want to save Amory. My lord, Amory is just a coward and a poor creature. You want to kill him, but it's as simple as pinching a bug to death. But it's much more difficult to increase your status in the heart of the Lord Duke than to kill Amory. It must be said that Sweetmouth Draff knew very well what the mountain really cared about. The mountain didn't care about the lives of his relatives or the honor of the knights. The only thing he cared about was his status with Lord Tywin. The only person the mountain obeyed was Lord Tywin. Dunsen, Polliver, what do you two think? Sweetmouth Draff, Dunsen and Polliver were the three most respected officers under the mountain. The three had followed the mountain for the longest time. The fact that they were not killed by the mountain showed their status here. On weekdays, Dunsen and Polliver didn't have a harmonious relationship with Sweetmouth Draff. The three of them worshipped the mountain crazily and wanted to be the most respected person under the mountain. But today, Sweetmouth Draff's suggestion was for the good of the mountain itself. The two would not harm the interests of the mountain. So after the mountain asked them, both agreed with Sweetmouth Draff's words. The cavalryman, whose head was still pinched by the mountain, breathed a sigh of relief. At least his mission was completed. Although the process was a bit tortuous, the ending was always good. As for his personal life and death, the cavalryman didn't care. Okay, since you all say so, then go and organize the troops. Let's go rescue that useless Amorite. The mountain gave the order, while looking at the cavalryman in his hands. As for you, you dare to threaten me with the Duke, I will break your neck. The mountain laughed grimly. Although he agreed to go to rescue Amorite, he had no intention of letting the cavalryman who reported the news go. Dunsen and Polliver watched coldly. As the mountain's subordinates, they naturally had the same cruel heart as the mountain. They did not care about the life of a small cavalryman at all. My lord, please spare his life. We still need him to lead the way. It was still the Sweetmouth Draff who persuaded. Among the mountain and his group of subordinates, only he used his brain, and knew that there was still use in saving the cavalryman's life. The mountain glared at Draff irritably. The anger in his heart was getting stronger and stronger. He couldn't wait to kill people. Get lost. The mountain threw the cavalryman to the ground. If it were an ordinary cavalryman, this would be enough to kill him. Get out of here. I'll settle accounts with you after I save that rubbish Amory. The mountain roared directly and ferociously, without thinking about it. The mountain's men were used to it. They regarded the mountain's tyrannical behavior as an honor. The soldiers under the mountain in Harrenhal began to prepare for departure. The mountain personally led the team, and led 100 cavalrymen to rescue Amory. Dunsen and Polliver accompanied them, and Sweetmouth Draff stayed at Harrenhal. The team was ready, and under the leadership of the messenger cavalry, a group of people set out from Harrenhal, and ran towards King's Landing. The mountain was tall, and led the way. He had to ride a horse himself, with his feet hanging down, almost touching the ground. Then one horse was responsible for carrying the mountain's armor, and the other horse was responsible for carrying the mountain's giant sword. This is the mountain, the most vicious man in the 7 kingdoms. On the other side, Xia Changqing sensed the position of the cavalry he had sent out in his mind. After feeling that the cavalry was heading in their direction, Xia Changqing was relieved. Since the cavalry had returned, it meant that his mission was successfully completed, and the team responsible for rescuing the Amoris was already on the way. Ed, Yoren, Merys. Xia Changqing shouted loudly, everyone, prepare for battle. Yes, sir. Ed and others took the order. They had already settled the civilians and those who could not fight, such as Sansa and Arya, and the former Westerland cavalry who could fight, had already been ready, waiting for the arrival of the mountain. The mountain's death is approaching. Chapter 20 Ambush, Raid. Everyone, prepare your bows and arrows. Ed roared in a low voice. They had already made preparations, and were waiting for the arrival of the mountain's team. There were no telescopes in this world, and it was impossible to predict the enemy thousands of miles away, but Ed and his team had Xia Changqing, who had a cheat. As long as Xia Changqing was willing, he could sense the distance between him and every person he resurrected. With this cheating ability, Xia Changqing could control where the mountain and his team ran to. There was no shortage of mountains and jungles on the Westeros continent. A team of 40 or so cavalrymen seemed a lot, but in fact, they were just a very small number of people. It was just that the Westeros continent was called a continent, but its area was only about the same as the European continent that Xia Changqing was familiar with. It was called the Seven Kingdoms, and the territory of each country was not large. In this case, the military strength of each country was actually very limited. Even the most powerful Western territory only had 40,000 to 50,000 troops. In less than half an hour, a group of cavalry appeared in front of Xia Changqing and his team. Xia Changqing touched the neck of the horse under him nervously, but the horses he rode were all war horses, so they would not be affected by the atmosphere before the war. Xia Changqing was the most nervous person. Ed and others stood still, bent their bows and strung them, waiting for the mountain's troops to enter the effective range of the bows and arrows. 100 steps, 80 steps, 60 steps. The cavalry ran very fast, and in the blink of an eye they were less than 30 steps away from Eddard and others. With the speed of the war horses, it would take only a few breaths for the enemy to come to the mound where Eddard and others were ambushing. Eddard pulled the bowstring and pointed the arrow directly at the mountain. The mountain was not wearing heavy armor at this time, so it was a good opportunity to shoot him. The cavalry whizzed past. Shoot! Eddard roared, and the arrow was like a meteor, heading straight for the mountain. As the Duke of Winterfell, Eddard had already put down his martial arts, but with the size of the mountain, there was really no more perfect target than him. Whoosh! Just as the sound of sharp arrows piercing the air sounded, the mountain was already hit by 2 arrows, one in his right shoulder, and one in his lower abdomen. Ed and Yoren looked at each other, and a sense of mutual respect emerged in their eyes. The 2 arrows that hit the mountain were shot by these 2 people. Enemy attack. Someone in the mountain's team shouted. Under the sudden attack of arrows, the whole team was in chaos. Many cavalrymen pulled the reins and stopped subconsciously, looking for the enemy. Charge! Ed drew his sword and roared, kicking the horse's belly fiercely with both feet. A group of black armored cavalrymen rushed down from the hill beside without any flags. The towering terrain gave the war horses time to accelerate. Ed and Yoren walked side by side as the arrows of the whole team and crashed into the cavalry of the mountain. The mountain only had time to retrieve his great sword at this time, and he did not wear armor, but the battle had already begun. Eddard and Yoren were the first to take the lead. With 1 sword each, they stabbed the 2 cavalrymen to death. Eddard, kill the mountain first. Yoren, kill the mountain first. The 2 shouted at the same time, then looked at each other and rode straight to the mountain. Eddard and Yoren were already excellent swordsmen, and at this time, they relied on their immortal bodies and completely ignored defense. They just attacked, and attacked again. Before the 2 rushed to the side of the mountain, the number of people killed by their swords was already enough to count. Protect the Lord. There were also brave men in the mountain's team. Dunson and Polliver turned their horses and blocked the way of Eddard and Yoren. Eddard and Yoren were not afraid at all. They raised their swords and fought each other. Dunson and Polliver fought each other. The horses roared, and the swords clashed. Eddard had no defense at all. His swordsmanship was open and upright, but the consequence was that the door was wide open and full of flaws. The face of Polliver, the first swordsman under the mountain, twitched like a cramp. His swordsmanship was as treacherous as a venomous snake coming out of a hole. Ed's sword was heavy, while Polliver's was agile. After just a few rounds, Polliver left many wounds on addition. Polliver was secretly happy, and he was full of ridicule for this group of people who overestimated their own abilities. However, he did not know that Ed was immortal, and the wounds on his body were also deliberately inflicted by addition. He slowed down his movements to confuse the opponent. After a few more rounds, Polliver's eyes lit up, and he saw the right opportunity, and his sword came out like a venomous snake hunting, biting Ed's neck fiercely. However, before Polliver could be happy about killing the enemy, Ed grabbed the sword stuck in his neck with his left hand, swept the iron sword with his right hand, and chopped off his head with one sword in Polliver's incredible eyes. Blood spurted out from Poliver's broken neck. This evil man never figured out why Ed didn't die immediately after his neck was pierced. Ed had put away his sword and turned his eyes away from Poliver's headless body. At the same time, Yoren just happened to kill Dunson. The mountain had 2 of his 3 minions. The 2 looked at each other and then looked at the mountain at the same time. There was no obstacle between them. Seeing his trusted men being killed, the mountain roared and smashed the iron helmet that he had not put on at Eddard. The anger had broken through the mountain's reason. Eddard raised his sword to meet it. The iron helmet hit the iron sword and was bounced to the side. The sword body trembled constantly and Eddard's hands also trembled constantly. He was secretly shocked. The mountain was so strong that he was no match for him in this regard. Yoren, siege the mountain. Eddard shouted. He was not sure. The hot-tempered Yoren had already ridden his horse towards the mountain. As the 2 passed by, Yoren slashed the mountain's body with a sword. The mountain was riding a horse, but his size was so huge that he could charge on the battlefield without any setbacks, but it was extremely difficult for him to move around in a small area. The mountain wanted to turn his horse around and kill Yoren, but at this time Eddard had already rushed to him, holding his sword with both hands, and slashed the mountain diagonally from top to bottom. The mountain felt aggrieved and raised his sword to meet him. The large 2-handed giant sword was like a door panel across his body. The mountain also used the giant sword like a door panel and slapped Eddard. Bang! A deafening sound rang out, and Eddard was driven back by the recoil force, and the warhorse under him was also surprised, neighing and dancing wildly. The power of the mountain's attack was so terrifying. Eddard was shocked, and Xia Changqing, who had been hiding in a high place and watching the battle, was also shocked and moved. The power of the mountain was already unstoppable for the 7 countries. If he gained immortality, who could defeat him when he roamed the continent? At this moment, Xia Changqing looked at Moshan, as if he was looking at a peerless beauty. Chapter 21. 4 heroes fighting the demon mountain. The mountain is really a fierce general. Xia Changqing sighed unconsciously. Although the mountain could not be compared with the peerless generals he knew in Westeros, the mountain could be called a fierce general. How could a villain like the mountain be a fierce general? Just wait and see. My father will definitely chop off his head. Just as Xia Changqing was sighing, a clear voice suddenly sounded in his ears. Xia Changqing's face suddenly changed. Arya, didn't I tell you to stay with your sister? Who told you to run here? Xia Changqing stared at Arya. The girl's clothes were covered with mud. It was obvious that it was not easy for her to climb up the hill. She wore a helmet that she had found from somewhere on her head. Her dirty little face didn't look like the Duke's child at all. There is no danger here. Besides, with you here, if there is danger, will you ignore me? Arya said cunningly. She had seen along the way that, although this man was an adult, he was most afraid of death, more afraid of death than a little girl like her. If there was really danger here, Xia Changqing would have run away long ago, so Arya was not afraid at all. Xia Changqing never thought that he would be mocked by a little girl in his heart. He looked at Arya, who was like a wild boy, with an evil smile on his face. Arya, don't worry, even if you are killed by the cavalry of the mountain, I will save you. I wonder if you want to try the feeling of death. Xia Changqing's expression at this moment was very much like the weird uncle who tricked the little girl to see the goldfish. Arya shuddered, glared at Xia Changqing unhappily, and then paid attention to the battlefield. In the battlefield at the foot of the mountain, the cavalry brought by the mountain has completely fallen into a disadvantage. Except for the commander, the other cavalry are just fighting stubbornly. It is only a matter of time before they are defeated. The battle between Eddard, Yoren and the mountain is much more interesting. The mountain is huge, with half of the armor and the 2-handed giant sword in his hand. The weight is unimaginable. Even the best warhorse can hardly bear this unbearable weight in life. Flexibility has become an important factor restricting the mountain's performance. If Xia Changqing remembers correctly, the mountain will have a defeat in the future, and he will be defeated by Prince Oberyn of Dawn. The opponent is completely better than the mountain in terms of agility. Then he stabbed the mountain with a spear, but it was a pity that Oberyn was too reckless and was counterattacked by the mountain, and his head was directly crushed. The mountain seemed to realize that the warhorse not only did not help him, but became a factor restricting his strength. Although the mountain is irritable, he also has a keen intuition in combat. After blocking the sword from behind Yoren, the mountain pressed the horse's back, and the warhorse neighed in pain, bent its front hooves, and fell to the ground. The mountain also took the opportunity to turn over and landed, with the sword in front of him. The feeling of being on the ground made the mountain feel very good. Just now, the two little bugs, one harassed him from behind, and the other attracted his attention from the front, which made the mountain extremely angry. The freed mountain glared and stared at Yoren fiercely. This damn black-clad man was always looking for an opportunity to poke his kidneys. Although the mountain was vicious, he still needed the kidneys very much. The mountain roared, and ran like a giant. He held his giant sword at his waist and secretly accumulated strength. Yoren, be careful. Ed saw the danger of the sword and hurriedly warned. Seeing that the situation was not good, Yoren pulled up the reins and urged the horse to dodge. However, it was unknown whether the horse was frightened by the murderous aura of the mountain, but it froze in place, waving its front hooves anxiously, and did not dodge immediately. In the blink of an eye, the mountain had already rushed to Yoren, waving his giant sword and slashing down. He intended to cut Yoren and his horse in half. Fuck. Yoren cursed loudly, not caring to get angry with the horse. He jumped off the saddle and jumped to the ground in embarrassment. Looking at the horse he was riding, it had been split in half by the mountain sword. The horse's blood splashed all over the mountain, making him look like a god or a demon. Yoren secretly swallowed his saliva, and a faint fear came to his heart. Although he had an immortal body, being cut in half would definitely not be a good experience. At this moment, Yoren suddenly saw a figure who had touched behind the mountain without knowing when. Sharpfang, who had been lurking for a long time, finally seized the opportunity when the mountain's old strength had been exhausted and his new strength had not yet been generated. Puff, puff. Sharpfang stabbed the mountain's armor with 2 consecutive swords. The mountain felt pain and roared. His left hand swept behind him and grabbed Sharpfang. If he had grabbed it, Sharpfang would definitely suffer a serious injury. Unfortunately, after stabbing twice, Sharpfang had already jumped back flexibly and narrowly avoided the mountain's grab. At this time, the mountain's attention was also attracted by Sharpfang and another person who was sneaking around to find an opportunity attacked. The person who attacked was Rorge. Rorge, with a ferocious face, held a one-handed axe in his hand. He jumped high from the blind spot of the mountain's vision, grabbed the axe handle with both hands, and chopped the axe on the mountain's right shoulder. Crack. The axe chopped through the mountain's armor, opened the mountain's flesh and blood, and got stuck on the bone of his shoulder. Rorge's face changed. The axe was stuck in the mountain's bones. He couldn't pull it out. Rorge made a quick decision and gave up the axe. He rolled on the ground and got behind the mountain from under his crotch. The mountain cried out in pain after his shoulder was cut and then became furious. Rorge's axe was still stuck in the mountain's shoulder, but the mountain seemed to be unaware. He grabbed the hilt of the giant sword with both hands and swung it, constantly chopping everything around him. Rorge and Fang were frightened by the mountain's crazy momentum and fled far away, not daring to move forward. Ed wanted to attack the mountain several times, but was blocked by the mountain's giant sword. Under the huge recoil, Ed's palm trembled constantly, and he couldn't even hold the sword steadily. For a while, he couldn't get close to the mountain. Several people were frightened by the mountain's momentum and didn't have the courage to move forward. Their faces were ugly. Unfortunately, the mountain's crazy momentum did not last long. His huge body made him consume several times more energy than an ordinary person. After the whirlwind slash lasted for 3 or 4 minutes, the mountain finally couldn't hold on and stopped, leaning on his sword with his hand and breathing heavily. Ed, Yoren, Rorge and Fang, the 4 of them took advantage of the situation and attacked the mountain from each side. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 22. Today we have a new hero. Rage increases the mountain's attack power, resistance to attack, and agility. After the mountain released his ultimate move, he instantly fell into a state of stiffness. Although the 4 people who besieged the mountain did not have the consciousness of a king, they were still at the level of gold and platinum. Take advantage of his weakness to kill him. 3 swords from 4 directions were inserted into the mountain's body from different positions. Roger also took the opportunity to pull out his axe from the mountain's body. The mountain's body trembled suddenly. He roared to the sky. His bearded face was full of hideousness and murderous intent. He gathered a last bit of strength and swept with the sword. The 4 were shocked. They didn't expect that the mountain in this state could still fight back. Everyone didn't bother to draw their swords and directly abandoned their swords and retreated. The mountain's giant sword swept across the lonely, and he couldn't hold on any longer. He half knelt on the ground with his sword, lowered his head, and didn't know whether he was dead or not. The 4 looked at each other, hesitating to move forward. No one was sure whether the mountain was dead or not. Although everyone was immortal, the power of the mountain made them feel afraid. The war of the cavalry was also coming to an end. Although the combat effectiveness of these cavalry in the west was similar, the cavalry resurrected by Xia Changqing had the bonus of fearlessness, so it was expected that they would win. Charge. Kill. Xia, who had been standing on the hill watching the show, suddenly screamed, pulled out the sewing needle from her waist, and rushed down the hill. Xia Changqing was startled by Xia's sudden action. He looked at Xia, who rushed out, and then looked at the battlefield. At this time, the battle was almost over, and the cavalry were finishing off the enemy, so there was no need to worry too much about Xia's safety. However, even Xia had rushed out, and if he was still standing on the hill watching the show, he would seem a little too cowardly. Charge. Xia Changqing shouted in a very childish way, but he also felt a little excited. He caught up with Xia and ran down the mountain together. The mountain had already fallen, and the cavalry he brought with him were almost dead or wounded. If he didn't finish off the mountain now, when would he? Xia Changqing ran to the battlefield with a sword in his hand, and was about to strike the mountain with a sword, but was stopped by Eddard, who was quick-eyed and quick-handed. My lord, be careful. Xia Changqing naturally followed suit, and stopped beside Eddard. He was just pretending, but Xia Changqing had not forgotten how the Prince of Dawn died. Don't be reckless when the wind is favorable, and don't be reckless when the wind is against you. Steady is the kingly way. Xia, who told you to run down? Why don't you stay with your sister? It's very dangerous here, you know. Eddard grabbed Xia Changqing and immediately turned around to scold Xia, which really made Eddard worry. Eddard, do you think the mountain is dead? Xia Changqing asked. He himself could confirm that, as long as he could get within 1 meter of the mountain and successfully use the return of the dead, it would mean that the mountain was indeed dead. However, being 1 meter away from the mountain was too dangerous. With Xia Changqing's thin arms and legs, if the mountain caught him, he would be crushed to death like a bug. My lord, I'm not sure either. You can't think of the mountain with common sense. The mountain half knelt on the ground, with his head lowered, and his chest did not rise or fall at all. He looked like he was dead. Maris? Xia Changqing shouted. Maris, where are you? My lord, I'm here. Maris, who was collecting spoils in the distance, ran over happily after hearing Xia Changqing's shout. My lord, if you have any instructions, let me do it. Maris glanced at Ed with a proud look in his eyes. He, Maris, was the first person the Lord had resurrected, and his position in the Lord's heart was not something you people could compare to. Xia Changqing heard Maris's thoughts. He didn't mean to do that. In fact, after more and more of his men were resurrected, Xia Changqing had been controlling himself from listening to their thoughts. He just didn't expect Maris to think so. Xia Changqing looked at Maris strangely. Maris, go over and see if the mountain is dead. Xia Changqing ordered Maris. This, sir, the mountain looks dead, right? Is there any need to confirm? When Maris heard that he was asked to confirm the mountain's life or death, the pride in his heart disappeared instantly. He was a little hesitant with a sad face. Maris had just observed the power of the mountain clearly. If the mountain was pretending to be dead and waited for him to pass by and directly stabbed him with a sword, he would definitely not end up well. I told you to go, so go. Why are you talking so much nonsense? Xia Changqing ordered with a straight face. He just called Maris over subconsciously, but since Maris had already come, who would go if he didn't? Meris looked at Xia Changqing with a sad face. His eyes revealed that he was ruthless and ungrateful. But Xia Changqing had already given the order, and Meris could not resist. He raised his sword and carefully moved to the side of the mountain. He stretched out his sword and tentatively poked the mountain's body with the tip of the sword. Like the last straw that broke the camel's back, the mountain's body fell to the ground with a bang after being poked by Meris. Meris jumped up in fear like a mouse seeing a cat and ran back to Xia Changqing's side. Looking at the mountain lying on the ground, motionless, Meris smiled awkwardly. My lord, the mountain looks like he is indeed dead. Do you need to tell me that? Xia Changqing glared at Meris, who was as timid as a mouse. Ed, clean up the battlefield. Let the brothers rest. Let's go take down Hirenhal. Xia Changqing looked at the huge corpse of the mountain lying on the ground with shining eyes. He originally had no confidence in taking down Hirenhal, but now it was different. With the mountains joining, the strength of their team directly increased several times. Now taking down Hirenhal is just a piece of cake. Xia Changqing has this confidence. Yes, sir, Ed said. Meris. Sir, I'm here. Take people to carry all the bodies together. Yes, sir. Meris replied with a bitter face. He sighed in his heart. Why did he always have to do such dirty and tiring work? But the reality is so cruel. Meris, who is at the bottom of the team, is also a familiar person to Xia Changqing. Who else can be ordered around but him? Meris understood Xia Changqing's meaning and gathered the bodies of the dead cavalry together to facilitate Xia Changqing's resurrection. So Meris did not take off the armor on the bodies, which also made his work several times more difficult. Chapter 23, Taking Control of Hirenhal. Evil whispers and blasphemous voices from hell echoed between the forest and the mountain. The dense corpses piled up together. Xia Changqing stood in the middle of these corpses, and the others stood outside the corpses, watching this scene with excitement, admiration, and fear. This is like a large-scale evil ritual site, destined to be spurned by the gods in the sky. As Xia Changqing walked, corpses stood up behind him, and the resurrected warriors scattered around Xia Changqing. The atmosphere on the field was weird and terrifying. Xia Changqing's footsteps finally came to the side of the magic mountain and stayed there. He took a short breath. Although the skill of returning from the dead has been upgraded, this large-scale use still caused Xia Changqing's mental overdraft. His body shook slightly, his mind was blank, and he felt a burst of pain from time to time. It was just a coincidence that Xia Changqing had resurrected so many people before, and when he came to the magic mountain, his spirit could not support it, which made the magic mountain look special. Excessive mental exhaustion made Xia Changqing shaky, but everyone was shocked by this weird atmosphere and thought that Xia Changqing was preparing for some ceremony. For a moment, no one came to help him. Xia Changqing cursed in his heart. For the sake of his image, he insisted not to fall down. 1 minute, 2 minutes. Half an hour passed. Everyone looked at Xia Changqing in confusion, not knowing what he was doing. However, Xia Changqing's method of resurrecting the dead was too weird. They had no precedent to refer to before, and thought it was a normal phenomenon. A group of people stood there for half an hour without moving. Thinking about this scene, it was quite funny. After half an hour, Xia Changqing's feet were almost numb from standing. His spirit finally recovered a little, and he began to work on resurrecting the mountain. Originally, the mountain was the only one who had not been resurrected. Although the mountain was unparalleled in his life, he was no different from others after his death, and his mental exhaustion was the same as others. As his mental power was drained away, the mountain stood up from the ground, opened his bloodthirsty eyes, stared at Xia Changqing, and then slowly half knelt in front of Xia Changqing. Damn, you scared me. To be honest, Xia Changqing was still very stressed when facing the mountain at close range. Although he knew that he could completely control the mountain, the pressure in his heart could not be relaxed. After resting for an hour, Xia Changqing finally recovered, and then he summoned Edit and others. Edit, pass the order down, reorganize the team, cavalry in front, civilians in the back, we go to Hirenhal. Yes, sir. Edit took the order, and everyone took action. Xia Changqing took the lead, wearing chainmail, and drawing his sword, with Edit on the left and the mountain on the right, pointing his sword in the direction of Hirenhal, full of vigor, and the whole army attacked. The team marched quickly, with the cavalry leading the way, led by the mountain. In less than half an hour, the entire cavalry team had arrived outside Hirenhal. The mountain rode in the front. Without shouting, the soldiers on the tower had already spotted the mountain. There was no one else in the 7 kingdoms who was so huge except the mountain. The gate of Hirenhal was open to welcome the return of the mountain. However, the westerly soldiers did not know that this mountain was no longer the mountain they knew. "Sir, welcome back. I wonder if your trip was smooth. Where is Lord Damari?" Sweetmouth Draff stood on the central street of the castle, respectfully welcoming the return of the mountain. He had carefully looked at the team. There were many more people than when they left. The armor of the cavalry was full of scars. It was obvious that they had been through a big battle. But Raff did not see Amory. The main purpose of this trip was to rescue Amory. "When I lead the team there, Amory will be dead." The mountain jumped off the horse and said in a muffled voice. At this time, there were more than 400 westerly soldiers in Hirenhal. The mountain had to control these 400 people. "What? Lord Amory is dead?" Raff exclaimed. "A dead Amory is worthless. If he fails to save Amory, the mountain's trip would be in vain." "Sir, didn't you bring back Lord Amory's body?" Raff continued to ask. Bringing back Amory's body would be considered a job well done to Lord Tywin. "No. Raff, I'm very tired. Go down and make arrangements. I want to eat." The mountain shouted dissatisfiedly. He stared at the sweet-mouthed Raff. "If you say one more word, I'll twist your head off." The sweet-mouthed Raff shuddered all over. He then noticed that the mountain didn't look very happy. It was better not to offend the mountain at this time. Under the order of the mountain, the castle quickly prepared food. More than 100 cavalrymen belonging to Xia Changqing ate and drank enough to recuperate. During this period, Xia Changqing also observed the situation of Hirenhal. Hirenhal is a typical stone castle, large in scale, enough to accommodate thousands of people. In today's Hirenhal, in addition to the soldiers from the west, the largest number of people are the captives captured by the mountain after he attacked the castle. These people were locked in cages, and Xia Changqing noticed that some soldiers were specifically abusing and killing these captives. Xia Changqing is not a saint, but this cruel and brutal scene still makes him very uncomfortable. So Xia Changqing changed his mind. He originally just wanted to take the soldiers back to the north as soon as possible. You said to control the North Army and then eat away other lords little by little. But now Xia Changqing wants to take a risk. Not only according to the direction of the plot, the mountain also told Xia Ji that Tywin will lead the army to Hirenhal soon. Xia Changqing wants to stay in Hirenhal, use the mountain to assassinate Tywin, and then control the entire West army through Tywin. With the strength of the West and the North, it is enough to sweep the entire continent. This is undoubtedly a very risky behavior, but Xia Changqing deeply understands the truth. Take a chance, and the bicycle will become a motorcycle. The mountain was Duke Tywin's trusted subordinate and the most important general under his command. Duke Tywin could never have imagined that the mountain would assassinate him. Although Duke Tywin was in a high position and had great power, he was just an old man after all. He could be shot to death by 2 crossbows from the imp in the toilet, and he could also be stabbed to death by a dagger from the mountain. The more Xia Changqing thought about it, the more he felt that this could be done. He found Ed and told Ed his idea. Ed was a little surprised by Xia Changqing's bold idea. The benefits of this matter were huge, but at the same time, the risks to be borne were also great. Ed advised Xia Changqing to think twice before acting. Chapter 24 Sword Skill Unlocked. Under the nose of the Westerland army, assassinating the Duke of the Westerland, Tywin, is exciting. Although Xia Changqing always reveals his cowardly nature inadvertently, he has an adventurous spirit in his bones. Besides, assassinating Duke Tywin is the mountain's business. Tywin will go to the mountain if he wants to find someone. What does it have to do with Xia Changqing? After making up his mind, Xia Changqing took Ed to live in Hirenhal temporarily. They wore the clothes of the Westerland soldiers and were under the management of the mountain as the army left by the Amori. Hirenhal is so big and there are so many Westerland soldiers. Xia Changqing and Ed blend in with it, just like a drop of water blending into a river. No one will pay attention to them. Sansa, Arya and the civilians who were originally going to the wall, led by Yoren, Sharptooth and Rorge, continued to go to the north. During the days lurking in Harrenhal, Xia Changqing suddenly found that he had a rare leisure time. Ever since he was brought to King's Landing by the system, he has been busy and running around. He didn't expect that he would feel free now that he was in the enemy camp. After being free, Xia Changqing began to ask Ed about swordsmanship. He couldn't always be behind the scenes. Sooner or later, he would step out to the front. So becoming stronger was the only way. My lord, I'm honored to teach you about swordsmanship. You really need to hone your martial arts. But forgive me for being blunt. You are past the best age for training. It is difficult for you to achieve decent results in swordsmanship. The upright Duke of Winterfell had no idea that telling the truth would make others feel uncomfortable like a thorn in their hearts. Xia Changqing waved his hand weakly, looking at Ed with complicated eyes. This man, who was like the frozen soil in the north, didn't know how to speak tactfully. Ed, you just need to teach. How much I can learn is my own business. I won't blame you. Ed drew out his sword. It was a standard long sword for Western soldiers, not a precious sword. When Ed was young, his swordsmanship was outstanding and could be counted among the 7 kingdoms. He once competed with the Sword of the Dawn. Although he had no power to fight back, it was also a capital of Ed's pride. But after he inherited the Duke of Winterfell, his pampered life made him fat and his swordsmanship declined. As the Guardian of the North and the Duke of Winterfell, everything was done by his subordinates, and Ed's swordsmanship had no place to use. Although Ed's swordsmanship is now sparse and ordinary, his theoretical knowledge is still extremely rich, which is undoubtedly more than enough to teach Xia Changqing, a beginner rookie. Ed's swordsmanship focuses on strength, might, and large-scale moves. It is a skill for killing enemies on the battlefield. As Ed explained the swordsmanship skills, precautions and other knowledge to Xia Changqing in detail, the system that had not appeared for a long time suddenly jumped out of Xia Changqing's eyes. Ed Stark explains swordplay skills to you. Swordplay skills unlocked. Basic skills. Swordplay LV1, 0%. Xia Changqing's heart moved, and he immediately drew out his long sword, imitating Ed's way, and began to practice chopping and stabbing with the long sword. The system panel in his mind was also slowly changing. Half an hour later, Xia Changqing finished his first practice of swordplay. He already had a clear understanding of swordplay. Look at the system again. Basic skills. Swordplay LV1, 5%. In half an hour, his swordplay improved by 5%, which gave him a clear understanding of his progress. In the days that followed, Xia Changqing was completely devoted to practicing swordplay. He was not a genius, and it was impossible for him to grow directly into a swordplay master. But Xia Changqing had a system, and he could see his progress intuitively every day, which also made him particularly motivated to practice. After unlocking the swordplay skills, Xia Changqing also unlocked the bow and arrow skills, one for close combat and the other for long range, which complemented each other. Regarding the learning of various abilities, Xia Changqing once again thought of the coins he got from Jaqen. The Black and White Courtyard is the place to train real talents, but Xia Changqing has no plan to go to Bravos yet. While practicing basic skills, Xia Changqing did not forget another ability given to him by the system. To be honest, Xia Changqing rarely uses ice spears. The skill of Return of the Dead is about to be upgraded to level 3, but the ice spear is still standing still without any improvement. The days in Harrenhal gave Xia Changqing plenty of time to recharge himself. He wanted swordsmanship and skills. Entertainment in this era was also extremely scarce. Now it was a war stage. The soldiers in Harrenhal had nothing to do except daily training. Xia Changqing pulled Ed to feed him moves every day, and his practical experience increased rapidly. Half a month later, Duke Tywin led the army to Harrenhal. Xia Changqing and Ed stood in the team welcoming Duke Tywin. This was the first time Xia Changqing met Tywin Lannister. Duke Tywin has a dignified face, never smiling, and short golden hair, like the angry mane of a lion. In front of Duke Tywin, no one dared to laugh loudly and offend his majesty. Duke Tywin rode into the city on horseback, looking down at the respectful mountain, without a smile on his face. Then the Duke dismounted, walked to the side of the mountain, and said in a cold voice, "Mountain, follow me." The tall mountain was as obedient as a kitten in front of Duke Tywin. He lowered his eyebrows and eyes, and followed behind Duke Tywin. The mountain behaved like this, not because Xia Changqing specifically asked him to, but because the mountain had always been like this. In the past, the mountain would only obey the orders of Duke Tywin alone in the Seven Kingdoms. Duke Tywin brought the mountain to the main castle, and he took the first seat without hesitation. Mountain, how did Amory die? Duke Tywin asked coldly. Although he had received a letter from the mountain explaining the cause of Amory's death, Tywin still had a little doubt about the mountain in his heart. The Duke knew very well that Amory and the mountain were at odds, so he had enough reason to suspect that the mountain watched Amory die. Bang! The mountain's huge body half knelt on the ground. He said to Tywin in a muffled voice, "My lord, Amory was killed by the Brotherhood without banners. I was incompetent. When I arrived with my men, Amory had already died at the hands of Beric Dondarrion." Chapter 25 Sir, I disappoint you. The Brotherhood without banners. Lord Tywin's words did not express his emotions. He had not taken the Brotherhood without banners seriously, but he did not expect that he would lose one of his knights because of the Brotherhood without banners. The Brotherhood without banners was founded by Beric Dondarrion and the red-haired monk Thoros. Originally, they followed the orders of Eddard, the Hand of the King, to go to the Riverlands to capture the mountain. After the death of King Robert and Prime Minister Eddard, they turned into an illegal organization specifically to fight against the Lannister family. With such a natural cauldron, the mountain directly put the blame on the Brotherhood without banners. Lord Tywin had no doubt that Amory died at the hands of the Brotherhood without banners. What he doubted was whether Amory was dead or still alive when the mountain arrived at the scene. "Where is the body of Sir Amory?" Tywin asked again. "Amory's body was taken away by the Brotherhood without banners, and I was not able to take it back," the mountain replied. This was the truth. He had indeed not seen Amory's body. The mountain, "I'm disappointed in you." Duke Tywin stared at the mountain with cold eyes. This was a proud and brave general. If you want to perfectly control the mountain, you have to discipline him from time to time. "Yes, my lord, I disappoint you." The mountain's tone was flat, and he slowly raised his head. Duke Tywin's brows frowned slightly. He felt that the mountain was a little different today than before. This matter beyond his control made Duke Tywin feel a little uneasy. "The mountain, your gold dragons this month will be reduced by 1/3 as a punishment for not saving Amorite." As a noble, the mountain had an insignificant territory in the west. Because of his love for poppy wine, the mountain forced more than a dozen households in the territory to grow poppies. This resulted in the mountain's territory having no output at all, and naturally no economic source. All of the mountain's economy depended on Duke Tywin's reward. So Duke Tywin directly reduced the gold dragons by 1/3 a month, which was a very important thing for the original mountain. But this demon mountain is no longer the same demon mountain. Although the golden dragon is important, it is not as important as the order given to him by Xia Changqing. Demon Mountain raised his head and looked directly at Duke Tywin. Although his eyes were full of respect, Duke Tywin still felt uneasy. At this time, Demon Mountain should have admitted his mistakes in fear. Who gave him the courage to raise his head and look directly at himself? Of course, it was Xia Changqing who gave him the courage. Caca. The sound of armor rubbing rang out, and Demon Mountain stood up from the ground. "My lord, I disappoint you," Demon Mountain said again. Although he had to accept Xia Changqing's order to kill Duke Tywin, his respect for Duke Tywin in his heart did not diminish in the slightest. "Mountain, what are you doing?" Looking at Demon Mountain's abnormal behavior, Duke Tywin felt something was wrong at this time, but he still sat upright. The majesty he had cultivated over the years made him not think that Demon Mountain would dare to do anything that was not good for him. "My lord, I disappoint you." Demon Mountain repeated this sentence, and he had already strode forward. Lord Tywin's expression finally changed. He frowned, as if he couldn't understand why the mountain was like this. The conceited Lord Duke didn't call the guards in immediately. "Mountain, tell me what happened?" Lord Duke was still trying to control the mountain with words. Until now, he still didn't think that the mountain would hurt him. This is Lord Tywin Lannister, a man who is extremely conceited and confident. The mountain stretched out his big hand and grabbed Lord Tywin's neck in a flash. "My lord, I disappoint you." Hearing the mountain's words again, Lord Tywin finally began to panic. He opened his mouth and wanted to shout to the guards, but before he could say anything, The mountain's other hand covered his mouth. Lord Tywin grabbed the mountain's arm with both hands. Lord Tywin had never been used to carrying weapons on his body. At this time, facing the crisis brought by the mountain, he didn't even have the strength to resist. Lord Tywin, who was feared by the West and even the Seven Kingdoms, was essentially just a fragile mortal. Cabay. A crisp sound rang out, and the spirit in Duke Tywin's eyes slowly disappeared. His hands also lost their strength and fell to the ground. The mountain let go of his hands, and he looked at the dead Duke Tywin calmly. The mountain was a cold-blooded and cruel man. The guilt in his heart for the death of Duke Tywin was only a flash, and he quickly regained his calm. The mountain put Duke Tywin in a straight position, so that he still looked like he was sitting upright on the chair, and then he pushed the door out. The guard standing at the door was a little afraid to stay away from the mountain. Even the soldiers in the West were afraid of the fierce man. Looking at the mountain leaving, the guard stepped forward to close the wooden door. In a glimpse, he saw Duke Tywin sitting on a chair with his back to the door, as if he was in deep thought. The guard didn't think much about it and closed the door directly. In Harrenhal, Xia Changqing, who was about to return to their base with Eddard, did not know that the mountain had already completed the task he had assigned to him efficiently and quickly when Duke Tywin just arrived in Harrenhal. When the mountain found Xia Changqing and named him as Duke Tywin's cupbearer, Xia Changqing was still a little confused. But soon Xia Changqing heard the voice in the mountain's heart and knew that he had actually killed Duke Tywin. Xia Changqing was stunned for a moment and immediately followed the mountain away. Duke Tywin was dead, so he had to resurrect him before others found out. The mountain used the excuse of finding a cupbearer for Duke Tywin and took Xia Changqing all the way to Duke Tywin's room. In fact, the guards did not dare to stop the mountain at all. Everyone knew that the mountain was the first good dog under Tywin. If they made the mountain unhappy, the mountain would definitely dare to kill them. Afterwards, the Duke would only scold the mountain a few words. The mountain took Xia Changqing into Duke Tywin's room, then closed the door and blocked the guard's gaze. Xia Changqing walked forward quickly, walked around the chair, and walked to the front of Duke Tywin, and saw the supreme ruler of the Westland up close. The old lion closed his eyes tightly, his neck tilted to one side, and leaned on the chair motionless. Xia Changqing did not waste any more time. He moved his mind and activated the skill of returning from the dead. After a moment, Duke Tywin suddenly opened his eyes. His eyes were still majestic and his face was still serious, but his broken neck and tilted head greatly affected his image. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.